Well, good morning, and I'm happy to welcome you to the second day of the February Advisory Commission on Special Education. I'm Victoria Graff, the Vice Chair. Our Chair, David Toston, is a little under the weather, so I'll be pitching in for him. He's online with us and keep us going here, so we're sending good wishes to Chair Toston as he recovers. So we're going to start with our roll call. Denise?
Chair Toston.
Present virtually.
Vice Chair Graff.
Present.
Commissioner Estes. Commissioner Hamilton.
Present.
Commissioner Liu.
Present.
Commissioner Michaud. Commissioner Notch.
Present.
Commissioner Oyakawa. Commissioner Royce.
Present.
Commissioner Snipes.
Present.
Commissioner Sorter.
Present.
Commissioner Topalian.
Present.
Commissioner Wilkins.
Here.
Commissioner Ding.
Present.
Commissioner Tex-Jargo.
Present.
Commissioner Liu. Commissioner Oyakawa.
Present. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Commissioner
Thank you.
Oyakawa.
Thank you for checking.
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Shall we have the pledge to the flag? Please stand. Thank you so much. And so let me just briefly review the agenda for today. I'm pleased that our beginning session, first session, will be with Dr. Marquita Grano-Shire, who is currently the chair of the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing, former dean of the School of Education at California State University, Long Beach. That'll be followed by our liaison reports from the State Board of Education and also from the state special schools. After that, we will be in session as we have two committee meetings, two study meetings from our committees, Legislative and Policy and Operations and Planning Committee. At that point, we will take a lunch break and then resume around 1 o'clock while we will have general public comment. Followed by the CDE Annual Performance Report, the State Performance Plan Update, which will be followed by the agenda building for the Advisory Commission, and then general public comment and adjournment approximately between 2:45 and 3 p.m. So if I could have the slide for public comment so that we can inform everyone as to how they can access the meeting, provide comments. Okay, we have on the slide the public comment where you have the conference dial-in number, 717-908-1937, and the participant access code. So please, if there are any members of the public who would like to provide comment throughout the meeting, here is the information for you. Thank you very much. I don't believe we have any other information at this time to share, so I think if Dr. Marquita Grano-Shire is ready to present, I think we can go ahead and begin with her presentation.
Good morning, all. Thank you for allowing me to spend a little time with you this morning. I'm going to try sharing my screen. If that doesn't work, we've got a backup. Okay, hang on one second. Can everybody see my screen without? Okay, cool. Great. Thanks for the thumbs up, Dr. Tostin. Well, it is certainly my pleasure to be with you this morning. I wanted just to give a little background of who I am. I know Dr. Graff very well, but I don't know the rest of the members. And so I thought it would be important for you to know who I am. I served as a teacher in the Los Angeles Unified School District several decades ago as a special day class teacher for students who were then labeled as severely handicapped and students with autism. I then had the opportunity to move to Cal State Long Beach, where I was a faculty member in the special education program, served as coordinator of our special education programs, then associate dean, and then, as Vicki said, dean of the College of Education. From there, I had the privilege of serving as the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Educator Preparation at the Office of the Chancellor, the California State University System. Some of you may know that the CSU prepares about 50% of teachers in California, so I had the privilege of working with my dean colleagues to support educator preparation. I retired a couple years ago and now am serving as the chair of the Commission on Teacher Credentialing and also the chair of the Board of Directors for the American Association of Colleges of Teacher Education. So this is a photo of my first field placement in a segregated school over 30 years ago. This photo is a constant reminder of the importance of our collective efforts to educate children with disabilities, and it has sat on my desk in every position I've ever had, and it's still here with me at home. The woman in the center is Jackie, and she's the lead teacher. She and her 3 instructional assistants were amazing teachers from whom I learned so much about caring for students with disabilities and their families, and about individualizing the curriculum for students with the most significant disabilities. However talented Jackie and her team were, she couldn't, in this setting, facilitate peer interaction with typically developing students. I'm sharing this photo with you because in some ways we've come a long way in teaching and supporting students with disabilities from the days of segregation to where we are now, but in other respects, we haven't made the progress that I was hoping we would by this time. So I worry that in 2024, we're still talking about the rationale for inclusive education and still do not have a coherent system of inclusive education for each and every learner in our state and country. These quotes are all from the report, One System, Reforming Education to Serve All Students. Special education too often becomes a place students go rather than a set of supports to help students succeed. Our schools and classrooms need to be designed to support all students, and too often they do an inadequate job of educating the students who don't fit a common mold. In a coherent system of education, all children and students with disabilities are considered general education students first, and all educators, regardless of which students they are assigned to serve, have a collective responsibility to see that all children receive the education and the supports they need to maximize their development and potential. And finally, the task force hopes that this report will provide a thoughtful, motivational beacon and not be just one more document that people acknowledge as generally accurate, but that sits on shelves and affects no lasting change. Dr. Vicki Graff was a member of this group, along with state leaders and community thought partners. This report has served as the foundation for future work across many segments here in California, and as I will illustrate later, particularly for the work of the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing. So let me briefly share my understanding of and rationale for inclusive education. There is a plethora of definitions and frameworks out there regarding inclusive education, and a seminal one is offered by the National Center on Educational Restructuring and Inclusion. And that reads, providing to all students, including those with significant disabilities, equitable opportunities to receive, sorry about the typo, effective educational services with the needed supplementary aids and support services in age-appropriate classrooms in their neighborhood schools in order to prepare students for productive lives as full members of society. Further, as my colleagues Mary Fisher and Deborah Staub, we wrote in 2001, inclusive education is far more complex than just the provision of supports and services. Inclusion is really about school renewal and change to improve the education system for all students. The rationale for inclusive education is both complex and simple, and I like to cluster them into three main areas: moral imperative, legal imperative, and then the research. First, there is a compelling moral imperative. That is, students with disabilities have a right to be educated alongside typically developing peers, or as we think about it now, they have a rightful presence. It may be an obvious statement, but children with disabilities are children first, and more specifically, general education students first. This remarkable statement was made by members of the President's Commission on Excellence in Special Education, formed by then President George W. Bush in 2001. Second, there is a long-standing legal imperative enshrined in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDA, or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act of 2004, which, as you know, is a federal law that makes available a free, appropriate public education to eligible children with disabilities throughout the nation and ensures special education and related services to those children. As you also know, federal policy mandates that every child is to be educated in the least restrictive environment. And this passage should sound familiar to you. Each public agency must ensure that, to the maximum extent appropriate, children with disabilities, including children in public or private institutions or other care facilities, are educated with children who are non-disabled. And secondly, special classes, separate schooling, or other removal of children with disabilities from their regular educational environment occurs only if the nature or severity of the disability is such that education in regular classes with the use of supplementary aids and services cannot be achieved satisfactorily. And third, the research on benefits of inclusive education for students with and without disabilities is unequivocal and compelling. That is, nearly 50 years of research and experience has demonstrated that the education of children with disabilities is most effective by having high expectations and ensuring access to the general education curriculum in the regular classroom alongside typically developing peers. Inclusion has benefits for both students with disabilities and their general education peers, including greater academic gains and social skills for students with disabilities. Data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics highlight possible lingering effects of limited educational opportunity. That is, only 21% of people with disabilities are participating in the labor force compared to 67% of the total population. The National Longitudinal Transition Study supports that this discrepancy is linked to inclusion in general education classes. After studying the outcomes of 11,000 students with disabilities, more time spent in general education was positively correlated with better outcomes for students with disabilities after high school in the areas of employment and independent living. So now let me move to inclusive teacher preparation and begin with an acknowledgement that this work happens across the segments. PK through higher education. My focus today is only on teacher preparation at 2- and 4-year institutions of higher education. National experts in education, research, and policy agree that what students need most is a qualified teacher for every classroom. The most significant variable within the school related to student achievement is qualified teachers. I and others propose that the same tenet is true for students with disabilities, and perhaps even more so. Not only do students with disabilities need qualified general and special education teachers and other support personnel, including school psychologists, communication specialists, and counselors, it is also essential that these professionals collaborate effectively with one another, with students and with their families in the development, implementation, and evaluation of educational programs. A growing number of faculty and colleges nationwide recognize that alone, they rarely have the breadth of knowledge regarding curriculum and instruction, nor the knowledge of individual differences to adequately prepare educational personnel for contemporary inclusive schools. Some faculty have responded to the challenge of developing inclusive teacher preparation with concern that specific areas of expertise will be devalued as faculty focus their attention on the breadth of knowledge necessary to prepare personnel for inclusive schools that serve our diverse student population. This tug between specific areas of expertise and a broad generalist perspective is not a new area of concern in teacher preparation, but rather has moved to the forefront by the somewhat new expectations for inclusive teacher preparation and the need for increased collaboration. If we are to achieve inclusive schools for all, I and others think it necessary for teacher educators to fundamentally change what they do and how they think about their professional lives to bring about lasting reform. That is, all teachers need to be prepared to address the needs of all students in collaboration with one another and with families. In California, we have approached the development of inclusive teacher preparation through what we call the common trunk. Of preparation, as illustrated here in this beautiful graphic. This work began over 8 years ago and culminated in a revised credential structure based upon the work of the task force I mentioned previously. The revised structure is intended to work in concert with the general education credential to best meet the needs of California students with disabilities. The approved structure includes 5 initial education specialist credentials, building off the same basic preparation, that is, that common trunk, as a general education multiple subject and single subject credentials. First, we have early childhood special education, birth through K, visual impairments, birth through age 22, deaf and hard of hearing, birth to age 22, mild moderate support needs, PK to age 22, and significant support needs, PK through 22. In addition to the common trunk of preparation that will be shared with their general education counterparts, all prospective special education teachers will also have some specialized common areas of preparation, such as case management, preparing IEPs, transition planning, and working with paraprofessionals. And each specialty area will have unique knowledge, skills, and abilities that will be identified within a set of teaching performance expectations, or TPEs, and have a set of program standards aligned to each specialty area. The hard work happens in the trunk. That is a space where faculty from various disciplines and backgrounds come together to decide on what every teacher should know and be able to do. As suggested by our colleagues Marlene Pugash and Linda Blanton, to build capacity for inclusive practice, the curricula of dual certification programs must be designed to ensure that candidates develop a sufficient range and depth of pedagogical skills as they prepare to provide instruction that can better meet the needs of the increasingly wide range of students they teach. And that is what the faculty at California State University Long Beach did over a decade ago when they developed the Urban Dual Credential Program. I had the honor of serving as dean of the college at that time and was able to provide both support and pressure to the faculty as they grappled with developing an inclusive teacher preparation program. The Urban Dual Credential Program prepares K-8 teachers to work in general and special education settings in high-need urban schools. The Dual Credential Program blends elementary general education and special education content, knowledge, and pedagogy in a clinical teaching model to prepare students who can work seamlessly with all students across settings. The program is built upon the following conceptual principles: collaborative inclusive models of teaching and learning, research-based practices, culturally responsive framework, multi-tiered systems of support, and a clinical model for field work. The program of study emphasizes integrating evidence-based research and instructional strategies as outlined by the California State Standards for the Teaching Profession, the state credentialing standards, and the innovation configurations provided by the Cedar Center at the University of Florida. Underlying program development is a shared understanding that graduates will exit the program with deep understanding of the state standards, appropriate academic content and pedagogical knowledge and skills to address these standards, and perhaps most importantly, knowledge, skills, and experiences in collaborating with other educators and with the diverse families and communities that they serve. According to Dr. Nat Hansubada, chair of the Department of Liberal Studies at CSU Long Beach, the program continues to this day. Cohorts have ranged in size from 10 when we first began in 2015, to 23 in 2020, and then last year, 17. UDCP is one of the multiple pathways at the beach to becoming a teacher, and Nat shared that 95% of alums report they are in full-time teaching positions. Before I conclude, let me take this opportunity to introduce you to a statewide grassroots organization, the California Alliance for Inclusive Schooling, or CASE. We are an intersegmental group of professionals dedicated to the development of inclusive schools for all students. We began our work in the summer of 2018 with the broad goal of developing and sharing practices regarding inclusive schooling for all students in California. Our focus is on how we might work across disciplines and across PK-12 and higher education to ensure high-quality inclusive teacher preparation. As you can see on the screen, you have the steering committee there. I have the honor of serving as co-chair along with Don Cardinal from Chapman University. We have Linda Blanton from the Cedar Center, Audrey Gomez and Megan Kosher from Thompson Policy Institute and Chapman University, Mary Vixie Sandy from the Commission, Vicki Graff representing the California Association of Professors of Special Education from Loyola Marymount University, Kristen Wright, Sacramento County Office of Education, Sarah Neville Morgan, Deputy Superintendent of Public Instructions for the California Department of Education, and Virginia Kennedy, representing the California Council on Teacher Education and CSU Northridge. If there is just one thing that you take away from my remarks today, I hope you remember this quote. Unless there are teachers who can succeed with students who experience disabilities, the promise that all children can and will learn is rhetoric. At the end of the day, students with and without disabilities need knowledgeable general and special educators and other support personnel who have the disposition and skills to collaborate with one another in the delivery of education for all students. Faculty have no choice but to respond to national mandates and policies that will result in teachers and other educators who can work with all students and their families. Only then will we as an educational community have achieved the shared responsibility and practice so critical for the success of not only our students in preparation programs, but also ultimately the students in our schools. Thank you for your time and attention, and I'm going to stop sharing. I'd be happy to have a conversation or address any questions.
Well, thank you so much, Marquita. It's a real pleasure to have you join us this morning and not only represent the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing, which actually is the commission for all educators within the state of California, but also to share your depth of knowledge and expertise and passion for educating students with disabilities, including those with extensive support needs, starting from early childhood all the way through post-secondary. So thank you, Marquita. And as an aside, we're very pleased to have Marquita this morning because I knew that her daughter was getting ready to deliver Marquita's first grandchild. And the baby was born on Tuesday evening. So we were very fortunate to have Marquita with us. And congratulations, Marquita, for your first granddaughter. I got to see the picture this morning. She's beautiful. So thank you, Marquita. So I'd like to open it up now to the Advisory Commission here and also online. And it looks like we've got several comments. And I'm going to start with Commissioner Hamilton.
Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation and the work that all of you are collaborating to do in helping prepare teachers for including all students. I'm the parent of a disabled child who fortunately does go to a very inclusive school and reaps the benefits of co-teaching and is thriving emotionally and socially because of this placement. I just wanted to share, I don't really have a question, but I also participate regularly through the educational program at CSU Northridge. I'm regularly requested to come in and present with a parent panel in some of their classes for future educators and share our experience with inclusion and being the parents of students with disabilities. And regularly we get feedback from the professors of those teachers that it's the single most important class that these future teachers get, actually hearing the perspective of parents and hearing what it means to us to have our students included in classrooms. And most of these teachers are general education teachers taking a special education class. So even sharing to them the importance of understanding how to include all students. And I'm not sure how parents are included in the work that you do, or if this is something that's common at other universities, but just wanted to share my experience.
I really appreciate your comments, and I can't see your name, but thank you for sharing them. When I was a faculty member at Cal State Long Beach in our special education credential program, this was before the inclusive teacher preparation program, I had a young woman whose first name is Carla, who co-taught with me, and her mother, Hilda, would come in on a regular basis. And that practice of having students with disabilities and their family members essentially co-teach has continued at Cal State Long Beach. And I know several other, I can't speak to other institutions, but I know several other CSUs also have that practice. The problem is we haven't figured out a systematic way to do that and to, I'll just say it, pay our families to come in and co-teach with us. We haven't figured out how to do that yet. I think your perspective as a parent is essential in the development of our future educators. And it is an area of interest of mine. And I'll say I failed in figuring out how to do that systematically. So I appreciate your volunteer work to do that. And I hope that you will continue to do that because your voice is absolutely critical. Thank you.
Commissioner Snipes?
Thank you so much for your presentation. I think that for me, I'm coming from a very rural area, and the urban dual credential program, although is for urban areas, it resonated with me because it's something I was thinking about in our rural area where we have such a hard time retaining staff or just even getting people to stay, how wonderful something like that would be for Humboldt County and our rural areas in the state as well. So I really appreciated you sharing about that, and so I took some notes on that.
Right. Thank you for your comment. And Humboldt has an amazing teacher preparation program at CSU Humboldt. I do not know if they have what I would say is an inclusive teacher preparation pathway, but I know the faculty and the administration up there, and I know they would be interested. So perhaps a conversation with some of the faculty would get them thinking in this direction. I wanted to mention, and your comment makes me think about this, that even though the commission developed these standards, I think about 6 years ago, the commission, as of today, does not have a sense of how many of our teacher preparation programs have resulted in what is truly a dual certification pathway. To that end, some researchers from Chapman University and I'm forgetting the second university, it'll come to me in a second, have just disseminated a survey to all IHE, all institutes of higher education, via the commission to inquire as to the status of inclusive teacher preparations based upon these new standards. And so it's the University of Redlands and Chapman University. And so perhaps in a year or so, Vicki will invite me to come back, and perhaps those researchers can be with me, and we can talk about what the results of that survey are, so that you as a commission have an understanding of the quantity and the quality of those teacher preparation programs in California.
Commissioner Ruiz.
Thank you so much for being here. It was a wonderful presentation. I got so much out of it. I really appreciated how you started with that picture. My son turns 25 today, and his classroom all those years ago looked a lot like that classroom. And I thought it was lovely, actually. And he's had one of the most amazing experiences all the way through. I know we don't hear that all the time, but it just is the truth for my family and especially my son. So I really appreciate what you're doing. I also feel I love the trunk. And I think that one of those pieces of the trunk should be parent something like, I don't know, the word inclusion or their feedback or something, because it's just so important. I'm on this commission. I'm in spaces hearing of the amazing work that educators do. And I am so pro educator and administrator. I think everybody at the table should be respected and is so important. But I think having something or parent involvement is at the core of everything would go so far and such a long way with the trust that's necessary, and that just starts with being there from the bottom and all the way through and really understanding what educators do, what they go through, how they get here, how so many of their intentions are so beautiful. So yeah, again, I just want to thank you. I think this is wonderful. And I still think more parent involvement would go a really long way. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and happy birthday to your son. I agree that educators can't do the work that we do without families alongside, right? And so the California standards for the teaching profession have specific language related to collaboration with other educators and with families. And so I think whatever we can do as educators and parents working together to increase family involvement is only going to improve the outcomes for students with and without disabilities, quite frankly. Vicki, I see a couple hands on the screen. I don't know if you can see them or not.
Thank you. Yes, I'm finishing up with the commissioners.
Okay.
That's fine, Marquita. No, thank you so much. And we will get to our commissioners online. Yes. Commissioner Notch, did you have a comment? Thank you, Marquita.
Thank you. Echoing all of the gratitude for your presentation and your work. I'm a parent of a sixth grader who's in an inclusive setting, and his special education teacher right now is a rotation of substitutes because it's difficult to find and fill, those positions. And we've had some very delicate conversations as an IEP team about what might be possible in terms of the level and quality of support that he'll receive while that position is vacant. And his incredibly dedicated, wonderfully supportive team members, I'm gathering through those conversations, are feeling a little ill-equipped. So this work moving forward and in preparing a whole new batch and batches to come of educators to be able to step into multiple types of situations and have the skills to support students without being reliant upon kind of siloed services is near and dear to my heart. So thank you so much for this work and for sharing it with us today.
Thank you for your comments, and thank you for reminding us of the teacher shortage. It's nothing I was asked to talk about today, but since you brought it up, I'll just comment. The teacher shortage is chronic, it's severe, it's sustained, it's in high need areas like math, science, and special education. And all of us on this screen are dedicated to figuring out ways to mediate that shortage while at the same time providing the necessary supports and services for all students. And it's really a difficult process. We need more educators, and all of us from where we sit in our spaces are working on that every day. You reminded me of a comment that one of my fellow commissioners, David Simmons, who serves on the commission with me, made just recently. We were talking about inclusive teacher preparation programs, and I asked David, who happens to be the HR director in a school district in Central California, I said, well, what do you think about our graduates from inclusive teacher preparation programs? He said, they are simply just better. He said, they have this complex set of skills and experiences. They make amazing teachers and amazing collaborators. And from his perspective as an HR director, it gives him flexibility to use that dual certified teacher as a classroom teacher, as a consultant teacher, as a specialist. And so he thinks we need to graduate more of these folks, and I couldn't agree more. So thank you for your comment.
Commissioner Ding.
Thank you so much, Marquita, for being here today and for your presentation. I'm really glad that Commissioner Notch brought up the issue of the shortage of special educators. Last year, I was able to conduct some research surrounding this, specifically on why special educators feel burnout and stress at disproportionately higher rates than other teachers. And one crucial area that they mentioned was that gap between special education and general education. When it came to the practice of inclusion, a lot of students had difficulty implementing accommodations. I myself have had to learn how to self-advocate because a lot of times general education teachers, they might have only attended a class out of like their entire education process about special education. So many times it's very difficult to communicate to them what the students' needs are and making that a like flexible process for students. So I'm really happy that issue was brought up. I was wondering, are there any I guess like professional development opportunities for current general education teachers who want to maybe learn more about special education or as we are moving more students into general education classrooms, how can we facilitate that process so teachers are ready and they feel prepared and confident to have these students come in and integrate them into that community?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your comment and your questions. California has several statewide professional development opportunities. I'll just name two. We have the California SUMS, and for the life of me, Vicki, I can't remember what SUMS stands for. I'll look it up and send it to everyone. And then we, of course, have multi-tiered systems of support. We have an annual conference that comes up in the summer. I think it's sponsored by the Orange County Department of Education. And then the other organization is SIP, and I will think about it and tell you what that stands for. But those are three related system-wide professional development opportunities across California. And then across our higher education campuses, we have all sorts of faculty who have expertise in this area, who work with their local school districts to provide for professional development for both general education teachers and special education teachers and related service staff to continue to learn how to refine their skills and how to better collaborate in order to deliver supports and services. So I will get the exact names of those organizations and send them along to Vicki so that she can share them with you. Thank you for your comment, and thank you for the research that you've done in this area.
Marquita, we actually have a commissioner who works for SIP. I don't know,
Great.
Commissioner Snipes, if you'd like to expand on that.
Supporting Inclusive Practices Project.
Thank you.
That's what
Thank
SIP
you.
stands for, and we provide technical assistance in that exact area. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the other thing, if I may, Vicki, we have a partnership with CEDAR at the University of Florida. And so there are, last count, a dozen of our university teacher preparation programs that continue to work with CEDAR and to receive technical assistance to improve how we prepare teachers for inclusive schools. That California Alliance of Inclusive Schools sheet that I showed you, I don't think Linda Blanton was on there now that I'm looking at it. And Linda is from the University of Florida, the CEDAR Center, and she continues to work with us, even though there's not as much funding coming from CEDAR as there was several years ago.
Thank you, Marquita, for mentioning CEDAR, and also I'm also on the state leadership team for CEDAR, and one of the initiatives has to do with inclusive leadership preparation. So I know a survey was just done of universities that prepare school administrators about the content in coursework for future administrators related to inclusion. So the CEDAR project has been very instrumental, and Linda was listed on your slide, so she did get full credit. So good.
Thank you for this insightful presentation. And I have one suggestion regarding inclusion of voices is maybe because there's a lot of youth with disabilities, but also allowing them to be a part of this process, but also to get a survey from them, because mainly because whether they're in college or in high school, they're directly being impacted by the educational system, and they're being taught by teachers. And I feel like if you get a survey from students across the country, across the state, about how they are being well taught and how they feel like their teachers are being well prepared in a way, because I feel like that's very important, and understanding on how well are they being able to comprehend the work, but also how do they feel like their teachers are doing in a way. My question pertains to accessibility. How will this inclusion teacher preparation program be accessed by schools in California, but also how could this help students be in a more inclusive environment where students don't have to feel like they're segregated in a special education class all the time? Because constantly when I was little, I didn't spend a lot of time in my general ed class. I was morely in my special ed class. I felt like I was being segregated, and a lot of students to this day feel segregated. I've had parents come up to me saying that I want my student to be in a general ed class. However, they can't be because her autism is really bad and she's in a special ed class. And teachers have come up to me in class saying that I don't know what to do with special needs students. I don't know what to do with their accommodations, because a lot of them feel like students are abusing their accommodations in a way, and general ed teachers don't know what to do because they're burnt out by creating a lesson plan because there's so many different types of accommodations, so many different students who have different type of needs. And my question is, how can this help to have a more inclusive environment for having for disability students to be a part of in a general ed classroom?
Thank you for your comments and your questions. I have to tell you, I was having difficulty hearing you. Your voice is very soft, and I was trying to read the transcript as it was going very quickly. So I'm wondering if someone in the room, whether it's the young person herself, can restate the question and a little slower for me, and I appreciate that.
No worries, I can do that again. My question pertains to accessibility. I'm really curious about how will this teacher inclusion preparation program can be accessed by all students and by all schools in California? And how could this help students to be a part of in a more inclusive environment where they don't feel like they're constantly being segregated to be in a special ed classroom all the time?
Right. Thank you for repeating that question. I think student voice in everything we do, just like parent voice, is absolutely critical. And if I can just, before I answer your question directly, talk a little bit about my friend Carla Ceramic, who is a young woman who this year is turning 37, which is crazy for me to think about. I first met Carla when she was a second grader in a school district here in California, Southern California, and I had the opportunity to help develop an inclusive classroom for her. And I've known her and her family for all these years, and she is my greatest teacher. And she has helped me to understand, from the perspective of a young person with a disability, what she needs and how I and her educational team can best meet her needs. So I think the way we include student voice in what we do is in some ways similar to how we include parent voice. We need to have you in the room with us, right? We need to have you sitting at the table, just like you're sitting at this very important commission table. And so there are many young people with disabilities that I know that serve in an advisory role, just like you're doing, and other students with disabilities do. And we as professionals, as educators, have to continue to figure out how to support you in this really important work. So back to how do we prepare classroom teachers? In my view, we need to have inclusive teacher preparation pathways at every institution of higher education. At some point we will. We don't have it right now. And there's a lot of reasons why people resist that we could talk about. I think you probably know what those reasons are. It's about differences. It's about segregating individuals. That is not what this work is about, right? That is not what you all are devoting your time for. And what I do in my retirement, I continue to advocate for inclusive teacher preparation program and to hold each other accountable as we continue to develop these programs. So I don't think that was a very satisfactory response, but it's the best I have this morning. And I really appreciate you reminding us of the importance of student voice. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hoyakawa?
Thank you so much for your presentation, and congratulations on your new granddaughter. That's really exciting.
Thank you.
I heard one of the comments really kind of stuck with me, that I think you were saying that there was, and this goes to your last comment as well, there's some resistance to shifting to this broader training, that it might, it sounds like you're getting some feedback that it might undermine expertise in specific subject areas, or there's some sense that might happen. And to anyone who is making that argument, I think I would like to remind them that just like all the UDL training that I think is coming through, it's really showing that this is something that is important for all teachers to learn, regardless if they even have a student who's ever identified as having needs for special education support. My daughter is, she's hard of hearing. She's got 22q deletion syndrome. She's also got autism. And she was in the county deaf and hard of hearing program, and we switched her 1 year to TK in our local school for mainstream, just to try it out, see if that would be a better fit for her. And when we tried to explain to her TK teacher what kinds of accommodations we were asking for, what types of things she would need for support, the teacher said, "Oh, those are just good teaching practices. That's what we do." And so I hope that, that all the new teachers that are coming up, and I think, as you said, those who have had this extra training, it's for their benefit, not just for the students. And it's also not just for the students with an IEP, but all the students in the classroom. And so perhaps this goes also towards our issues with teacher shortage and teacher dissatisfaction, of getting everyone on board to get these sort of basic understandings and skills. And I hope that this spreads. I hope that I would love to see not just trainings that are available, but whatever sort of recertification current teachers or senior teachers would have, that they would incorporate some of these trainings so that they are better supported. And hopefully, we will lessen burnout. We will increase communication across gen ed and special ed in collaboration with those groups. As you're saying, our other commissioner was saying, that is something that we hear a lot, is part of the kind of the gap that needs to be bridged. And then I would love to learn more about what is in that common trunk. Maybe that's another presentation to come up. But one more comment, and I don't know if this fits in with the requests for more parent and student participation in that common trunk of training, but is to bring in other parents who don't have kids with disabilities. Because some of the resistance I see as a parent in the school districts is other parents and sometimes other students, but I think mostly from what my personal experience is other parents who are concerned about bringing in being more inclusive, that it somehow hurts their kids. And I think that if we can help address that as well, that would just benefit everyone. So thank you so much.
I really appreciate your comments. And I love that you just called out, it's just good teaching. And that's what it is. It's good teaching for all students. When I think about my special education preparation and what I learned, and then being able to share those skills and strategies with all students, it benefited all the kids in the classroom, right? When I eventually taught in an elementary setting. And so I think we need to remind our colleagues, our neighbors, our peers about that this idea of inclusive teaching practices is going to benefit all learners. Because you and I all know that there's such a diverse group of students sitting in our contemporary schools. Kids with IEPs, those without IEPs, kids who are struggling, kids who are homeless. I mean, we can just make a list of the vulnerable populations in our schools and think about the power of that collaborative team in more effectively addressing the needs of all those diverse learners. So I appreciate you calling that out. I also appreciate your emphasizing the importance of collaboration, because a third grade teacher can't do this on her own, and a sixth grade teacher can't do this on his own. And so in addition to the skills and experiences and the content knowledge, we really need to teach educators how to work with one another. Just one thing I wanted to mention, when I was dean at Long Beach State, and we were developing the inclusive teacher preparation program, I used the term support and pressure. We could spend hours talking about what that meant. Bringing faculty with different expertise and different discipline experiences and traditions to come together and develop this new curriculum. The faculty tried to tinker around the edges and change, something in this course and change something in this course. And they finally said, no, we're just throwing everything out. And they built a whole new curriculum based upon their shared discipline. That took months. That was not an easy slog. And so the work is hard, the work is important, but we have, as I said earlier, we have a long way to go. So thank you for your comment.
Marquita, we have 3 more commissioners.
Okay. Okay, I'll stop.
No, I'm not saying that, but I hope you can stick with us just for a few more minutes.
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. So Chair Tostin.
Good morning, and I'll keep my comments brief. I really wanted to express my appreciation for your transparency about the challenges that we all are collectively facing and the efforts it will take to continue to make progress. What really resonates with me from our conversation is, and I appreciate how you've continually come back to collaboration. And as Commissioner Hamilton shared her experiences in, kind of co-teaching a college class, I wonder if that might be a vehicle for us collectively going forward. And Commissioners, this certainly aligns with many of the conversations we've had at previous meetings about how we shift mindsets through hearing the lived experience, because that's where the core of the commitment to inclusion rests. And so I just wanted to thank you for uplifting the work that's happening. We look forward to our future collaborations and any opportunity that you have to update us on the work or solicit our assistance. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Chair Tostin. I appreciate your comment so very much. And I didn't talk about co-teaching because I didn't know how much depth and time we would have. But in the Urban Dual Credential Program, we built the curriculum so that I think it was 3 courses were actually co-taught. And so the dean was able to fund that. So initially there was an investment by the dean to have 2 faculty teaching a couple of the methods courses. But as the enrollment grew, what we found is that we could staff 2 courses and staff it and have enough student enrollment that we didn't have to pay that additional money. So co-teaching is absolutely critical in building that sense of collaboration and shared discipline. And it's a great model for the future teacher sitting in that classroom to see 2 faculty collaborating. So thank you for bringing that up.
Commissioner Topalian.
Okay, so I want to say thank you again for being here. And as someone with a disability who never fit into a box and teachers couldn't ever figure out where to put me and what to do, I think this training goes towards that, where they would be able to support and provide the services and the good tier 1, tier 2 accommodations within the classroom setting. But most importantly, it creates a classroom of acceptance and the climate changes. And I think this, just as an individual with a disability, you would feel more accepted to be okay in that classroom because I am getting the supports and the services. So I really appreciate this work that you're doing. And, moving forward, if there's anything we can do to support, please, reach out to us as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Topalian. I appreciate you naming the importance of classrooms as caring communities for all students and educators and families who can support all students. It's critical. It's absolutely critical, especially these days. So thank you for lifting that up.
Commissioner Wilkins.
Thank you for being here today. I started my career off in education as a general education teacher, and I think there was so much I didn't know about special education, so I really love the idea of the inclusive teacher preparation. And my question is really around, is this extending into the induction programs? And as teachers, I think I could have benefited greatly from having a mentor teacher, not only a general ed mentor teacher, but a special ed mentor teacher. So is it expanding into those programs as we clear teachers' credentials?
I don't know the answer to your question, and I'm going to look that up and come back and or give it to a response to Vicki. I don't know the induction standards well enough to be able to speak to that, but that is an absolutely critical question. And it relates back to that question of what's the professional development for current teachers. So thank you. I'm going to do some homework on that.
Thank you. And then I would like from the dais to introduce you, Marquita, to Dr. Rachel Heenan, who is our new California Director of Special Education. She's only been on the job a few months, but she's a quick learner, and I look forward to collaboration between the Commission on Teacher Credentialing and CDE and the Special Ed Division. So Dr. Heenan, would you like to just say a few things?
Sure. Good morning, Marquita. Thank you again for your presentation, and congratulations on your baby girl. Hopefully you have some good quality time with her. I just want to thank you quickly. Your work rings near and dear to my heart. I was a director at Long Beach Unified and had a small part in working behind the scenes to bring the urban dual credential program to Long Beach. So love the work, would love to look at expanding those programs to not only urban settings, so maybe a rural teacher education program, dual credential program as well. So I look forward to that. And last, when I looked at that tree and heard some of the parents talk about being intertwined in that, I thought immediately of the roots of the tree, really, because that really grounds us in the work that we do every single day. So I look forward to working with you and everyone else to really expand this program to help support our students throughout the state.
Thank you so much, Dr. Heenan, and nice to see somebody in your position from Long Beach Unified School District. I grew up as a faculty member and then as an administrator at CSULB and had such amazing partners in this school district. So thank you. And I look forward to us working together as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to see if there's anybody in the room who would like to make a comment. We do have someone. And then if we can get ready to have the public comment slide available as well.
Good morning. My name is Debbie Schneider-Solis, and I am the CTA Liaison. I am a special education teacher as well. I have taught all, I hate the term, emotionally disturbed students. I'm hoping we're changing that term soon, to special day class, TK through 5, and I'm currently doing resource. I'm very pro inclusion, and so is CTA, and I want to know how we can support people that are already in the classroom, especially general ed teachers, to change their mindset about inclusion of our students instead of just wanting to push students aside and saying they need special day and saying they don't know how to deal with them, as I heard our students' commissioners state. If you had any recommendations or any professional developments that you would recommend.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your comment and thank you for your partnership. CTA has been a great partner, certainly to the commission, but also as I have grown professionally. I don't have anything specifically at this point in time other than for us to continue to be really vocal about the importance of inclusive education from where we sit in this giant room that you are in, but also to continue to lift up the best practices, the reasons for, the benefits for students with and without disabilities. I think we all need to give voice to that. So I don't have anything specific in mind, but I appreciate you being at the Advisory Commission today, and I'm always open to having subsequent conversations with any of you. Thank you.
And thank you so much for your comment. I appreciate that from CTA. And maybe during the break, I could meet with you because we do have some ways that we could collaborate with CTA.
Right.
If you could put the slide up again for public comment, please, and see if there's anyone on the line. Are there any callers?
There are no callers.
Thank you so much. Well, Marquita, thank you, thank you, thank you. I really appreciate you taking time, especially at this moment in time. But thank you so much for sharing your expertise and knowledge and passion and so forth. And so on behalf of the commission, we wish you well and in your work and look forward to future collaboration. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Graff, and thank you, all of you, for your great work. I appreciate you having me join you this morning. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're ready to move into our liaison report, but maybe we should start with the swearing in. So Allison, would you like to do that at this time?
Good morning. Good morning again. My name is Allison Yoshimoto-Tari, State Board of Education member and liaison to the Advisory Commission. And it is my pleasure to welcome up Commissioner Christine Oyakawa this morning to take her oath. And as mentioned yesterday, she was reappointed by the State Board of Education at the last meeting for another term on the commission through December 31st, 2027. So congratulations. And at this time, I'd ask you to please raise your right hand and repeat after me. Just one moment. I, Christine Oyakawa, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and to the Constitution of the State of California. That I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. And that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter. Congratulations. Thank you. We have this for you. I know it's always... presenting this to you. Thank you. Thank you.
Allison, do you have a report from the State Board? Ah, you're transitioning. Okay.
Thank you. And good. Actually, I apologize. I have to, these are the wrong notes. Can we do something first and I'll come back in just a moment? Or is this the only report?
No. We can move into the state special schools.
Perfect. Thank you.
No, just these two. State Board and the special schools. Liaison? I don't know why you couldn't.
No, that's fine too. I didn't know. Yeah, let's go.
Good morning. Good morning, commissioners and members here in the room today. Today's a special day. Today is my daughter's 22nd birthday, and I'm here. My last youngest, hard to believe that they're 22 now. Feels like it was yesterday that I had her, and now she's a young adult. Anyway, off point. Point is, my report for all of you from the state special schools, honestly, I could go on all day and expand in depth. But what I'd really like to focus on is what's happening and what's happened in the last few months. The PowerPoint that I'm sharing with you is really just general information. Most of you are quite familiar at this point with what my division does and the purpose of the work that we're doing daily to focus on what makes deaf and hard of hearing and visually impaired students' education as equitable as possible. Access for all, and I want to emphasize access for all, which I'll expand on in a moment. Okay, let's move down here. I'm pleased to tell you that the California School for the Deaf in Fremont just announced that we have a new superintendent. Her name is Amy Novotny. She is from Colorado. She's an educator and has been for over 20 years. She ran and set up a charter school in Denver, Colorado. She ran that for 10 years before moving to California. She is very highly skilled as an administrator, and I'm hoping she can come so you'll all have the opportunity to meet her to our next meeting. But we call all three of our schools and our three diagnostic centers fully housed at this point. There is high turnover, so it's nice to see all of our positions filled. Now we can focus on the bigger task at hand ahead of us, things that we need to do and focus on for the state of California. And again, I'd like to emphasize that the state of California itself has 17,000 deaf and hard of hearing children that we serve ages 5 to 22. And that does not include our infants. We're really supposed to provide support services for babies age 0 to 22. Not just 5 to 22. And that leads me to the next area that we'd like to focus on, which is SB 210. There are many questions currently from school districts across the state asking what's happening with SB 210. They heard that it was on moratorium, on hold. What's going on with that? SB 210 happened in 2015, a law that was passed where we need language milestone assessment established for our deaf and hard of hearing babies from birth to age 5. Now, we already have the DRDP that has been set up through special ed. The DRDP is there. And we have some areas within the DRDP that we are pulling and expanding and going further in depth on our analysis and assessments to make sure that those babies are on track. As you know, many of our babies that are identified as deaf or having some sort of hearing level variant at the school districts go in, they have very limited knowledge of teaching our deaf children. And many of them are hard of hearing, and hard of hearing are often forgotten. They think that their language of acquisition is on par with their peers, so then that means we don't need to provide services. But that's inaccurate. They do need to be served. They desperately need to be served. And that looks like what we need to provide is more technical support for them. and make sure that their language is as accessible as early as possible, not waiting until they're 5 years old, because by the time they arrive at 5, their language is incredibly delayed. Now with UPK, Universal Preschool, pre-K program that we have the commitment, don't forget that we need to include our lowest incidental population, deaf and visually impaired students. They need full access. So, and we're moving forward with SB 210 has been and is continuing to move forward. Now, what's happening with the data in the last 5 years is that we're realizing there's a lot of delayed areas that need to be fixed. And those areas need to be focused on with race and identity. That's not clear. There's a lot of forms that when you fill out these forms, here's an example of the form here. This is what gets filled out, and when a baby is born, identified by a doctor or an audiologist, they're referred to another audiologist to do another test. They have to fill out this form to refer them to Lead K Family Services. They have the HRSA grant connected with CDE, and they must make sure that once they get that information and that referral, they then refer that child to the school district within 10 days, their local school district. And that starts the process of providing services to that child. That can be with a regional center, that can be with an LEA, or with a SELPA. It depends on where that infant is residing at that time. And then they assume the role of making sure that the families get the services. And often, families are disconnected. We have to reach out to them and remind them we're here to support you to get that ball rolling. And it becomes a bigger challenge for many school districts because many school districts don't have their positions filled. So they're trying to figure out where are the missing links? Where do we develop those partnerships and make those connections happen? And we're very concerned about the data that we're getting. We're getting it, but it needs to improve. Areas need to improve to make the data more user-friendly, more accessible for school districts, and for them to use that so they actually can provide services. Now, currently, the assessment itself looks like this. It's a checklist. Does not demonstrate, inconsistently demonstrates, or consistently demonstrates. So filling out that checklist, that could be an educator, it could be a parent, it could be both. But we're realizing we need to figure out how do we provide accurate training and appropriate training and support to the school districts to start that process, to do that process on a regular basis. And that's the work we are currently actively involved in. Now, again, the terminology that's out there, we often see language deprived or language deprivation. It's a very real situation. We see that often. There are many adults experiencing that are starting to say, I was language deprived. And what that means is that they did not have full information and access that connects again to the same areas. Well, what inspired me yesterday, I'm changing my presentation a little this morning based on yesterday's conversations. And thank you, Rachel, as well. I'm very excited to work with Rachel as a side point as our new special education director, because I would need to fill these gaps. We need to fill the gaps in areas that have been lacking. For lack of a better term, I want more collaboration and making sure that this information is getting out there. My intense emphasis is that we currently have 2 deaf schools, 1 visually impaired school for the entire state of California. Now, those 2 schools, those 3 schools, the 2 deaf schools serve under 1,000 students together. Remember, we have 17,000 deaf students in the state of California. So a lot of these students are not being served, or served well. Let me emphasize what I mean by well. So going back to a comment we had with the term rightfully present, that is critical. We see a lot of gaps with educational interpreters. I get emails persistently from school districts saying we don't have an educational interpreter. We don't have qualified interpreters. We can, but do you mind waiving just for this moment? We can't continue that practice. Hold on. Thank you. We can't continue that practice. Sorry, apparently the microphone died on purpose, it seems. So the system itself needs to be addressed as a whole. We need to make the students, let me explain. I'm very proud of the state special schools. We have more kids that need to be at that school, but we also have many students who need to be at public schools as well. It's both. That's my point. It's both of those things. So how do we serve all of them? It's a huge challenge. There are so many deaf students that are getting minimal access at their current school districts. They put in an interpreter and they say, my job is done. We have an IEP, you have an interpreter, you have a note taker. Now, what happens in between those classes? What happens after school hours? What happens in the morning? What happens on the bus? These kids are always alone. Isolation kills the spirit of their motivation. There's no peer interaction, and I'm not interested in tokenism. I'm not interested in tokenism. That needs to stop. I am here with all of you with respect to learn openly with an open mind and an open heart. I want to work with everyone. I want to be your friend. I want you to be my friend. I want us to feel that deaf have value in the room. And I want to contribute more. And if we want to make that happen, what does that look like? I mean, maybe these classes, maybe the whole class learns sign. Or maybe we have more interpreters involved. Maybe we have some training. So we have a co-teacher, or we have a variety of other very creative opportunities, but people don't want to talk about it. They just want to make the best. They don't want to deal with it. How do we make this more accessible, emotionally fulfilling for our students? Emotional well-being is critical. And if you look at the whole picture, it's a hard conversations, very hard conversations that need to take place. People think about the ideology, but what is practical? How do we make it happen? And it's not about money or cost. There's no cost to educating a child. It should be free. Because children, their rights from birth is to get an education in America, and we need to make that accessible as far as we possibly can. All right, I'm off my soapbox. And that's it for this point, for this year. Any questions, thoughts, comments?
Commissioner Ding?
Thank you so much for being here today and presenting all of this. A little bit of background. My name is Rachel Ding, and I'm deaf and I'm hard of hearing. And so I've been learning ASL for the past 2 years, and I hope that I can become a certified interpreter one day. But I'm a senior in high school right now, and so much of what you spoke about just like hit home. For example, when you talked about how so many students are not being served or they're not getting quality service is so true. My district audiologist, before she was working for our district and some neighboring districts, she used to be a school audiologist that served over 200 students in like a dozen different districts because there was such a critical shortage of specialists, and she went in determined to help as many students as possible. but after many, many years of serving, she just got so burnt out of trying to get resources and services to students. And she was talking to me about that whole experience, and it was just heartbreaking. I remember after the pandemic, especially with face masks, I also really experienced that sense of isolation and that separation from the community, because it is really hard. It's, for a lot of hard of hearing students, it's very much an invisible disability almost, since hearing aids have gotten so small that you can't even see if someone's wearing them. I'm wearing my hearing aids right now. And I think that is really, really hard on students and families when they are trying to figure out how is the hearing loss impacting the student. And I think for Senate Bill 210, with making sure that from a very, very young age, they are getting the services they need is so crucial. I remember in elementary school, I didn't get hearing aids till I was 12. And I think it is like crucial to get those technology and those devices so students can participate in the community and in the classroom as early as possible. So I'm very happy that we are advocating for this, that we are getting the word out, as well as for the special schools, that I'm very happy that all the positions are filled, because I've also heard about so many shortages for specialists, for aides. And so that was just some comments and some things I wanted to share, because it really touched my heart that others have similar experiences and that we're finally sharing and bringing everyone together. My main question is just, how can we help? Like, as a commission, we have so many amazing individuals here. How can we get this word out? Is there any places that we can provide more suggestions, more information, or more outreach to parents and families to get them the resources and the information that they need?
First of all, thank you very much for sharing your personal experience. You are an example of what they need to see and hear. So thank you for that. Thank you for self-advocacy. That is so important, to know how to advocate for your own needs. And we need to incentivize, we need to make sure that all of our deaf and hard of hearing students can do that. So thank you very much for that. As regard to answering your question and getting that information out there, the state special schools is part of the Ed Code. And it is in the Ed Code, it's law. You can find it there, you can find us there in the Ed Code. It clearly emphasizes that we provide resources. So anytime someone reaches out for resources, tell them to go to our deaf schools, our blind school. They can go for free. The resources are available. The training is available. They have a great team of experts in the field that many people reach out to for support. For deaf, for our Deaf Plus, deaf with disabilities, deaf blind, additional services. There are many that need that, and there are so many that specialize, that are hard to find those qualified skills, and they bring trainings to your school district. Even more importantly, to add, as a community member means that you ask the person themselves who is deaf or visually impaired what their perspective is, what their input is. Don't assume. Do not make assumptions. People make decisions and assumptions without including the people themselves who have the lived experience. They have the lived, they can't be ignored. It's critical that they be included. There are so many things happening, bills that are being put on the floor for pass, and who's making those decisions? Let's explain and let's look more into what they mean by some of the things they're doing. Ask the stakeholders. Have they asked them? They have a voice in this process, and it's crucial. Be more inclusive with that communication. Be more transparent with information that's being shared. It's critical. There's so much misunderstanding that's happening out there. We are one large community together. Thank you.
Commissioner Hayakawa.
Thank you. My daughter is hard of hearing. I've said this already a few times today, every day. And it really, really resonated with me that you, and I really appreciate, as Commissioner Ding said, that you pointed out that the hard of hearing population is almost the invisible or invisibly disabled in the classroom. I think a lot of teachers assume, a lot of staff, even friends, assume that the student can hear more than they think or hear accurately what they're actually missing. And as technology has improved, there is, better communication, but there's still so much missing. And I appreciate that you're really pointing out that this is kind of a part of the population that is often forgotten, because especially if a student doesn't have an interpreter following them around the classroom, most people are not aware that they have that they are hard of hearing. My daughter has actually does have an interpreter, and even then, I think it's often forgotten that she does need support for access. And in that regard, I think the outreach services that you do provide, as Commissioner Ding had asked about, as a parent, we're constantly having to figure things out on our own. We're still trying to understand our kids' disabilities, and then having to go beyond that and find information on how to get the educators to support them, because it is low incidence. We have to find the information often and then share it out with them. And so I'm requesting that we have more outreach that's more proactive, pushing into both the districts as well as to the communities, the parent communities. And to that end, on your priorities for 2024, you noted, I see the last one is the guidelines for quality standards. That would go a really long way when we parents advocate for our kids and ask for supports that we find that we have to justify. And if instead there is a standard one that if I can just look at and say, hey, see, look, it's there, but two, just to present that to the staff, to share that out so that everyone already knows for all students, not just one with a loudmouth parent in the background, but every student who is deaf or hard of hearing has that already as an assumption and as a basis to start. That would really go a long way, I think, to supporting so many families in our community. And so I'm looking forward to learning more about that. And then again, the educational interpreters, we really have such a shortage, and I'm really hopeful that your work in getting movement on that. I'm not sure. I would love to learn more about what is happening and what we expect to see going forward. My daughter had an iPad interpreter for the first month of school, and there were times where the interpreters would switch online and nobody would know, and there'd be a person there with nobody signing, and so that's just unacceptable. And I look forward to learning more about what we can do to get that remedied. Thank you so much for all your work.
You're very welcome. Yes. And both educational interpreters, there's an educational interpreter task force and a DHH guidelines. Both of those I need to send out as an invitation to establish who wants to volunteer to be part of the task force. And you will get an email. All of you will receive that from my office with a explanation as to who's motivated to be included in this important work. Educational interpreters is a huge, honestly, it's going to take, I'm sure, at least 2 years to get everything established and in place. And I'm going to have the State Board of Education will be involved as well because they're part of the waiver process. It's so complex to the point that we need to undo and figure out, because the state of California doesn't require licensure for interpreters at this point, and it's causing more problems. At the rate it's becoming, the regulation itself is very loosely interpreted, and it can harm a child's access to the resources that they need the most. Like their iPad, that iPad interpreter should not be a thing that's ever allowed. It should be a live interpreter in person. Yet another layer of discussion, but thank you so much for bringing that up.
Commissioner Sorter?
Yeah, so in our county, we support over 2,000 students with low incidence disabilities. And again, just tying in the previous presentation in with yours and the shortage of DHH, BI audiologists, the turnover rate, the caseloads, right? It's very difficult for the services, but there are some great things going on. And last week we had the California Deaf Services come and do professional development with our staff, and that was very helpful and well received. We talked about earlier the credentialing program and preparing educators. When you have a student who's visually impaired, you can't wing your lessons, right? A teacher needs to be prepared. Those lessons need to be brailled out so they can take the test. And sometimes that's frightening, right? When who you don't know, and then they're like, oh well, the aide can do it, right? So it's just incorporating in the credentialing program and in training teachers and staff and how to support our students with low incidence disabilities. We have started in our county the Low Incidence Administrator Network, so bringing in other administrators and that provide supports to just kind of do trainings and provide the resources, just like you said. So I'm excited for the task force here we're talking about and doing the work to support our students.
Thank you very much for sharing that. It's good to know what you're doing as well. It's very valued.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Appreciate your presentation. And we'll continue on with our liaison reports and then open it up for public comment at the end. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Allison, please, the liaison report for the State Board. And then we'll move into Commissioner liaison reports.
Thank you very much, and for your patience with our technology. So we've had 2 State Board of Education meetings since the ACSE has last convened. So I just wanted to give some quick updates on both of those meetings. In November each year, we have student leaders who come to speak to the Board of Education on their findings in their committee work as a result. And so the Student Advisory Board of Education made their annual reports, and they speak on topics such as restorative justice, student well-being, socioeconomic equity, and big topics such as that. I did want to share, particularly because the commission has a committee, I believe, focused on mental health, that one of the comments from the students was to please, as a whole, have higher prioritization for students' mental and behavioral health, and to work in ways that even when there are resources, to help get those into the hands of students, because they feel like sometimes, even though when we have created resources, they don't always have immediate access to them. So that was an important thing that I wanted to share. In November, also, the State Board of Education approved the LCAP template, the new template, which is more explicit and was focused on being more concise, although many comments focused on the fact that they're still very long reports. But in essence, trying to ensure that districts really hone in on the action steps that are needed to support all of our students, including students with disabilities. And then also we approved the OPTEL, which is an observation protocol for teachers of English learners. And about 20% of students in the state of California are English learners currently. And as Dr. Heenan shared at the last meeting too, our students with disabilities, the number is increasing in the state of California, even though overall there's declining enrollment. And so I know this afternoon she's also her team is also presenting, which will be interesting. But what was important about the UPTEL is currently it's for students who are on core curriculum. And in the last regional English learner committee meeting, there was a presentation on how to support students who are dually identified as having IEP services, special education services, and needing English learner supports. And I think that that's an important piece because many of our students have multiple identities and multiple needs, but also multiple strengths as they approach the work. So I sort of talk about that everywhere I go, is just how do we support all of our learners? And kiddos don't get raised in silos. We all have we're all our own unique selves, and how do we support students that have those multiple strengths and needs? And then in January, I just wanted to share that our board vice president and president were both going to retain their seats for the coming year. So Dr. Linda Darling-Hammond will continue in her role as president, and Dr. Cynthia Glover-Woods will continue as vice president. And in that meeting, we also reviewed the annual performance review report, which will be presented to you this afternoon by Ms. Duncan Besseril and then Ms. Kazanis, both from CDE. And I think it's important to note in that report, again, that comes every January to the board for approval. Important to note that while we have made some gains, there's still clear areas for improvement and necessary areas for improvement. And that your expertise and your advice and the discussion that you're going to have this afternoon does help to inform the board, and beyond the board helps to inform those of us across the state that are supporting our students directly in districts and county offices about the needs. And so please, we thank you in advance for your conversation that you're going to have this afternoon around that data. There are many indicators, that we've made some growth on over the years, but again, clear areas where we could use your advice, and particularly in the different hats and experiences that you had, both as parents, educators, and in your work experiences, what we might be able to do to support. Thank you.
Are there any comments or questions from commissioners? I just wanted to follow up quickly in terms of community schools. I know that there had been some conversation regarding students with disabilities and inclusion and so forth with regard to community schools. Do you have any update at all on the community school work?
I don't, as that is more of a department-led initiative, and the state becomes the state board for certain approvals. However, I will certainly communicate that. That's a need. Since you raised community schools, there is an Empower Summit coming in May, held by the State Technical Assistance Association. I believe it's in Hollywood this year. So I will work with Mr. Tustin and Dr. Graff to get that information to you for those of you that might be interested in attending that summit.
Thank you. Commissioner?
I'm actually on the mental health committee with Commissioner Estes, so that insight about where youth are feeling is very critical, and I would love to connect with them about it and work with them, collaborate on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for the report. Appreciate it. And now we'll move into Commissioner Liaison reports. Commissioner Ruiz.
Thank you. In between the ACSE meetings, myself and Commissioner Lopez have the opportunity to meet with this year's FEC liaisons, Hillary Martinez from Parenting Network and Liz Spencer from Westside Family Resource and Empowerment Center, as well as various FEC colleagues. As you may know, at the end of 2023, CDE reissued a request of application, RFA, for the remaining region in California, Lake County, that did not yet have an FEC established. Did I mention I'm giving the FEC liaison update? I'm like, wait a minute, I just jumped in, but this is the FEC liaison update. Family Empowerment Center, thank you very much. It takes a community and a commission. So as a result, a new FEC was established in this region early this year, bringing the number of FECs to 32, providing services within the 41 FEC regions of the state. For the first time in history, since the establishment of the FEC Empowerment Centers enacted into Ed Code in 2001, all FEC regions in the state have an established FEC and are fully funded to serve families of children and young adults with disabilities between the ages of 3 and 22 in California. I'm excited to share about the strong partnership between the FEC directors, Seeds of Partnership, which is the CDE technical assistance partner for family engagement and FECs, and the CDE Special Education FEC team under Administrator Noelia Hernandez. There's ongoing and regular connection, and together they continue to share information, create more awareness about the FECs on some large and small platforms through presentations and conference exhibit tables. They have recently completed and are going to participate within the next several months, such as in platforms and events such as special education administrators of county offices, SECO, their meeting, the CDE State Migrant Parent Conference, the CABE Conference, ACSE Conference, and the Charter SELPA Community Advisory Committee, the CAC, and others. So on behalf of the liaisons, I just want to encourage our parents that may be participating today to access your Family Empowerment Center and see what types of supports are available. And also to our LEA and SELPA participants to explore partnerships and sharing information resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Wilkins.
In your virtual binder, there's going to be a folder for liaison reports, and inside of that is for SELPA, California SELPA administrators. And it goes over some of their advocacy work that they're doing, their professional development, as well as a lot of their efforts in the statewide system of support. And in addition to a liaison report, there's also their quarterly newsletter, Impact, which is for winter of 2024. So that's all there for your review. And I know we're a little behind, so I will let you read that at your leisure.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other commissioners?
I have the pleasure of liaising with the California Charter Schools Association, and they have a few things they're tracking in their advocacy efforts. One of the top priorities right now is focused on AB 1505, which is the Charter Public School focused legislation regarding petitions and renewals. Now that schools are getting ready for renewals to start back up, they'll be observing and tracking the implications of the new changes to this legislation. And one of the major concerns is with some of the schools is that the dashboard is not ready nor intended to be used for high stakes decisions about whether a school should stay open. And there's concern about seeing more charter schools getting shut down as a result. Another area they're focusing on right now are charter schools are now eligible for support for technical assistance based on their performance on the dashboard. And CCSA is actively encouraging charter schools to reach out to their county offices of ed to get connected with the supports that exist for them. They're following the Children and Youth Behavioral Health Initiative, and I'm sure you're all aware that's a historic investment by the state of California that takes a whole child approach to address the factors that contribute to the mental health and well-being of our children and youth. Charter schools in particular are educating themselves and learning more about the children and youth behavioral health services opportunities as they focus on growth and expansion in preparation for the new statewide multi-payer fee schedule for school-linked behavioral health services that will unite healthcare and education. And they wanted to go on to request that ACSE invite Autumn Boyland from Department of Healthcare Services to come and present the new fee schedule as a part of a future ACSE meeting. And finally, they are preparing for their annual conference, which will be in Long Beach next month, March 18 through 21st.
Thank you so much. Chair Tostin?
I'll keep my comments brief. Our last meeting was a very long time ago. I had an opportunity to connect with a number of the statewide organizations that include CASP, CARS Plus, and CTA, and had a conversation about their priorities, shared a little bit about the work of ACSE, and extended our willingness to continue to partner and collaborate as their priorities become sharper into view this year. Also had the honor of having a conversation with the Assembly Select Committee to provide a perspective on the challenges and successes since the task force report was published some years ago. And that was an opportunity where I shared our work and priorities, as well as what we are learning about the difference between inclusion and belonging. I also had an opportunity to submit my status as an honorary member of the SIP team. I presented with Kevin Schaefer at the Charter Schools Development Conference in Anaheim, where we shared additional information about the rightful presence as well as the work that the SIP team is doing throughout the state. That's all for my report.
Well, thank you to all the commissioners for your work as liaisons, and we look forward to continuing that for the sharing that for the future meeting. I want to open it up to any comments in the room related to the liaison reports, and also if we could prepare the public comment slide, please. I don't see any comments from the room, but let's leave the public comment slide up for a bit, see if anyone wants to call in. Do we have any comments? Any callers?
There are no callers.
Thank you so much. Okay, that ends our session on the liaisons, and we're going to move into the committee study sessions. And we have two committees that will be meeting on the dais here. And I would encourage any of our commissioners to either stay. We would really appreciate your contribution to some of the discussion of the two committees, or if you feel like you would like to step down from the dais, you're more than welcome to do that. So Commissioner Notch and I co-chair the Legislative and Policy Committee, and then also I'm chairing the Operations and Planning Committee. No? Okay, so we're going to start with the Legislative and Policy Committee, and Commissioner Notch and I are chairing that. And the main agenda item that we have for this committee is preparing for our day in April with the legislative. And I'm very excited about this opportunity to actually meet with hopefully the legislators in person or their staffers. But I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Notch to give us sort of our agenda for the discussion.
Thank you, Vice Chair Graff. Today we wanted to talk about more in depth about our April visit to the Capitol. We want to remind you of our Legislative and Policy Committee priorities and goals because we want to have very focused conversations. And so we'll be engaging in a discussion about issues that we want to bring to the attention of the legislators when we make our visit. And then we're also going to share information about some meetings with some staffers to discuss issues in addition to the ACSE priority areas. And then we'll need to go through logistics of who's setting up appointments, what does that look like, make sure that we have all of those pieces in place.
Thank you so much. So right now, we'd love to hear from those of you, from the commissioners regarding issues and topics. Obviously, the priorities for the commission are essential, but are there other issues and topics? And again, I would have this as a brainstorm session, and then we'll share these ideas with the various staffers just to see what they think in terms of getting their feedback and then being able to identify specific legislators who we think either are carrying specific bills right now or might be interested in future legislation. So I'm going to open up the floor to any thoughts and ideas. I see Commissioner Hamilton is ready to go.
I just would like to introduce the idea of including the rightful presence terminology and what that means and the difference between that and inclusion and expanding upon inclusion in all of our conversations when we do these legislative visits.
I guess another thing is more clarification about the IDEA Act on the IEP and what does it mean? Like clarification about it's like what would happen if you don't follow by that law or something? Because a lot of faculty members at school, at my school, and everywhere I go, they don't understand like what it really means, what the law really means. And I'm saying that you have to require this or else something might happen. I don't know, but like kind of like more specifically and clarity on that, on those laws, on 504 laws and the IDE, but also what the federal law says and what is in the clarification on that would be great.
Thank you. Commissioner Knott?
I should have quickly mentioned in the virtual binder, there is a copy of the priority and goal areas. So if you want to use that as a resource for the benefit of the public, I'll just give a brief overview. Our first priority is prioritizing the perspectives and amplifying the voices of students and their families. The next area is in implementing community schools, include, consider, and commit to the needs of students with disabilities. The third is increase the availability and quality of services related to social, emotional, mental, and behavioral health. Broaden the application of practices that are equitable and inclusive for every student. And then finally, boost literacy proficiency among students with disabilities. And there's broader kind of goal language underneath each of those. So just a reminder about that resource.
Commissioner Ding?
I think one thing relating to like that first priority and goal about amplifying the voices of students and their families, I think continuing the dialogue of how with every decision that is made, are the voices of students and families being considered? And when it comes to any type of government program or initiative, having a youth or of someone representing youth and their families being there, I think is so crucial to adding to that discussion. And also adding on to the idea of using that language that the students and families themselves identify with, I think is really important. And then two other things I feel like I've just been hearing about and I want to learn more about. One is I understand that the Let California Kids Hear bill was vetoed. I was wondering if there was any updates on additional legislation that is parallel or adjacent to that bill that's being introduced. And then thirdly is maybe on some data and information on how mental health services are progressing for youth, since I know that a lot of different initiatives and programs with the Child and Youth Behavioral Initiative have been deployed very recently. But I think it'd be good to see, firstly, how are they going to be held accountable to implementing those services? And secondly, how are you going to be tracking the milestones and the progress to make sure that the services are actually going to help over the next few years?
Commissioner Snipes?
I think looking through all the priority areas, thinking about some of the presentations that we've heard today, and obviously including rightful presence in the conversation, but also looking at the literacy proficiency priority and thinking of the science of reading and kind of the traction that that's gaining and supporting that. And then also support for that consideration of changing the emotionally disturbed and potentially emphasizing trauma as a part of that emotional support that's needed. So I think those are the main priority areas, especially, and with an emphasis on beginning and at birth and moving through adulthood.
Thank you. Since I'm relatively new to the commission, are there any commissioners who've actually participated in meeting with legislators? I know we had a very brief, abbreviated interaction last time. So I'm just curious if anyone has had the opportunity to actually go to the legislature. Okay, I see Commissioner Topalian And also, our commissioners online are very active here. So Commissioner Topalian, then Sorter, and then Tostin. Okay, very good.
So one of the things we did previously was the veterans, as we would be, I guess, sitting on this commission. Whoever has done this before would go with the people who haven't, the commissioners who haven't done this prior, and we would just go in teams and set up those appointments prior and be able to engage in these conversations. I mean, if I'm missing anything, please let me know. But I remember just meeting there and then going into teams and just addressing our needs areas or whatever our requests are.
Thank you. Commissioner Sorter?
When I did it with the senators in DC with the Council for Exceptional Children, we had scheduled all the appointments. And one of the nice things was we did have a sheet of paper with our stats, with our data, and what is our ask. One of the first things that they do ask is, what is your ask? Why are you here, right? And being precise to the point, and then having that sheet of paper, however our priorities are outlined with the data to support that would be my suggestion.
Thank you so much. And I'm also involved with the California Council on Teacher Education, and they do something similar here in Sacramento. And also they will have a policy sheet, a one-pager front and back that has that essential information on it as well. So I think once we gather the ideas of the commission, meet with the staffers that we mentioned, that Commissioner Notch mentioned earlier, we'll come up, send it out, maybe put it in the virtual binder for people to weigh in on. So thank you for that. Chair Tostin?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been shared. And one of the points of emphasis is remembering that we're an advisory committee. And so we may have gone on advocacy trips and lobbying trips with other statewide organization, really adhering to kind of our core message points and being able to be responsive as the staff or legislators may have questions or look for insight on specific topics. And good advice is to remember that we all can't be experts on every bill, every topic. And so we have an ongoing relationship with our Assembly and Senate liaisons as well. And so there's always an opportunity to follow up.
Thank you so much. And I would call attention to the ACSE website that does have the legislative members of the Honorable Marie Alvarado Gill from the Senate and the Honorable James Gallagher from the Assembly. So I think they should also be priority visits as well.
And also, I've had connections and met with Tanya Limberman, who is the chief consultant, but also the Assembly Education Committee. She's very in charge with special education. I met her at the conference a few months ago, so it's very important that we also connect with her because she's specifically in the Education Committee on special education. And another thing that regarding about inclusion from the priorities and goals, actually, I looked at a bill called Senate Bill 354, and it was vetoed last year, I think. I think it was vetoed on last month, and it was a bill about inclusion practices in special education, but also in general education. So it was basically vetoed. I think that this is something that we should bring back and have one of our Assembly members introduce back because I feel like it's very critical. So yeah.
I think I know the bill that you're referring to, and it probably would be good for us to do a little homework to kind of understand what some of the concerns were about it as regarding why it was vetoed and so forth. But thank you for bringing that to our attention. So Chair Tostin and I and Commissioner Notch will put our heads together in terms of starting to collect this data, and we are going to be meeting with Tanya Lieberman, so thank you for that, and Ian Johnson, and I believe it's Laura Lorber. Or Lynn Lober also. So we have the plans to go ahead and meet with them as staffers.
Great.
Any other comments on that? Commissioner Hamilton?
Hopefully I'll be able to attend. I also just wanted to throw out there that as a parent commissioner, I'm happy to share stories about my daughter and include her in any way. I don't think she's quite ready for a visit to the Capitol. Just yet. Eventually, maybe she'll want to do that. But I'm happy to share her story, and I have done legislative visits and shared her story and had very meaningful results because of that personal story. So,
very good. Thank you so much. Chair Tostin, anything else you'd like to suggest or comment on this topic? He's good. All right. Very good. Thank you, Chair Tostin. So we're going to switch gears now into operations, and I have a couple of items here, and I'm going to ask Chris to come up from Special Edge from the report, and also with the report. And if you could give us just a brief overview of where we are with and I also want to talk about the title a little bit, because I know it's changed over the last couple of years. I think it went from Special Edge to the Edge, and then it went back to Special Edge. I'm not quite sure where we've landed with that. And then also sort of what your process will be for helping us with the annual report.
Can you hear me okay? No. There? No? Yes? No? Okay. I'm not sure about the change in the title. No, can't hear me? I'll lean very, very forward. I know it did change, but that was before I joined the staff, so I think we're at the Special Edge and staying there. It's through the Supporting Inclusive Practices project, as you know, and we're always welcoming suggestions from the ACSE members on topics of interest, and looking forward to, we just got an approval from CD for our last issue and are starting to work on the next one. With regard to the annual report, thank you to everybody who helped us last year with submissions. We're always really happy to have you contribute to that report. And so we'll work with Chair Tostin to develop a list of topics, send it out to you guys with deadlines, and work with CDE on the appropriate approvals, and aim to get it out probably by the August meeting again. And just a reminder on the annual report, it is a reflection on the past year rather than a look forward for the ACSE, so that's important to remember. Anyone have any questions on that process that I can help with?
I'm just curious in terms of Special Edge, if the commissioners have any suggestions for articles, possibly topics to be included.
I think you all have my email, so anytime, drop me an email. We're really, really happy to hear those. We try to develop a theme for each issue, and we go through an approval process with that. And I'm always here when I can be to hear what you all are interested in. But we love the back and forth with the ACSE Commission.
And I think we will have a message from our new director for the Special Edge. I believe so. Very good. Commissioner Ding?
I just had a quick question. I was wondering, have you guys already thought of like a general area the next issue will be about?
Yes, I think I can. Oh, now I don't know which one to do. I think I can say that we have a preliminary approval on juvenile justice and special education for the theme for the next issue. And so we're working on a list of topics there, and we'll talk with Chair Tostin about how the ACSE Commission might want to interact with that.
I'm very happy about that. I think that since that is a main issue, that is a main article that you are publishing, I think the best thing is contacting with Office of Youth Restoration. Man, I love that place so much. But emailing them for a stats report about how many juveniles with disabilities are incarcerated. So having that report would be great, but also getting interviews with those who are incarcerated with a disability would be great.
Thank you for that.
Chair Tostin?
Yeah, and Chris, thank you so much for your partnership and collaboration as we are thinking about the preparation of the annual report for all of the committees. Please consider topics that you would want to share in the annual report in terms of reviewing the work that's been accomplished this year. And so I find it's easier to begin thinking about it now while we aren't trying to reflect for the entire year of meetings and conversations to write the report over the summer. If anyone is interested in contributing to the next article in the Edge, a particular background or expertise, or would like to connect us with someone who might be able to support us in sharing our voice related to students with disabilities in the juvenile justice system, please follow up with me and or Chris so that we can make sure that we share our voice for that topic.
So thank you, Chris. Appreciate it very much, and we'll all be working together.
Thank you all so much.
Chair Tostin, I know that we had a conversation, didn't mean to put him on the spot. Chair Tostin, to put you on the spot, related to your suggestion about note-taking and how we might be able to implement that.
Yeah, and actually I'll follow up with the team at CDE and briefly for all of us. As we're talking through the meeting, there's lots of great recommendations that sometimes don't become memorialized because we all are engaged in the conversation, and our teammates from the department have jobs as well that they're doing during the meeting to keep it going. And so being thoughtful of ways we might formalize different recommendations, if I am suggesting that we invite SUM's MTSS for the next meeting, that I might follow up with, just a note to help the operation so that we don't miss anything, since there are lots of conversations that take place during the course of ACSE. And so I'd ask you to contemplate that, and at our next commission meeting, we'll have a more in-depth conversation around how we can continue to improve our operations and infrastructure to make sure we're not missing any information.
Thank you. Commissioner Sipes?
I'm just wondering if we have an opportunity to use the recording of our meetings to gather the transcript from that so that we're not asking for someone else to add to their workload. But we do have those transcripts available to us through the Zoom recording.
No, that's a great idea. And I often, when I'm a secretary of various boards, I use the transcript for my minutes. So I think that's a great idea. Any other thoughts, comments? Okay, and I think the final item, and Chair Tostin talked about this yesterday, Chair Tostin said, great idea. Is we had the conversation about changing the bylaws related to the election, and so that will be forthcoming. We don't have any work to do on that at this time, but just in preparation for the future. So that's all I have in terms of agenda items for this particular committee. Any other comments or thoughts? Okay, I'll open it up to the public in the room. If anyone has any comments to share, and if we could share the public comment slide, thank you. Oh. Commissioner Hayakawa.
Sorry, I have a question actually, if it's okay to ask from the prior committee. Is that still okay? You're in charge of everything, so I figure I can ask you. I thought we used to get a list of pending or proposed legislation related to special education, like with a short synopsis of what was being proposed and what the status was. And I wondered if there's something like that can be shared before we as we prepare to visit in April, and even just sort of an ongoing reference point in one of these drop boxes that we have. It would be really helpful for my old brain to track and think things through.
Well, I know in the executive secretary's report yesterday, she outlined some of the bills that are pending that relate to our work, but maybe we could get an update as you're suggesting prior to the April meeting.
Yeah, I thought we had an actual comprehensive list because there's several, right? And I'd love that we get highlighted on some that are priorities, but I just there's a running. I think I can do a search online myself, but it would be nice to have that accessible for all of us in the commission.
Chair Tostin has a comment.
Yeah, and you're correct that used to be a practice that we have, and I'll just remind us of the conversation. I don't remember when we had it, but just because of the sequence of our meetings and the legislative cycle, it was difficult to keep up with all of the bills that were happening, and we didn't have an opportunity to collectively take positions or discuss all of the bills. And so per our bylaws, we take not positions, but we don't necessarily advise unless we have a collective opportunity to discuss it. And between our October meeting, the February meeting, and April meeting, there's just so much that happens that the timeline didn't line up for us to necessarily track everything in real time and have the conversations we needed to. And so it doesn't prohibit us from relying on some of our partners in the statewide associations who are capturing their own lists and the department, but just recognizing our limited capacity to have conversations about all the bills that are on the floor at any given time.
Okay, see, I forgot we had this conversation already, so this is why I need this written down somewhere. I need that transcript. Thank you. I guess I still would request if there is some way, even if we can't take action on it as a body, just sort of to have that information available, even if it's just a link that we're all provided where we can quickly access that information. As a parent, I'm not always aware of what's out there, and so if anyone has something they can share, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Commissioner Liu?
Yes, hi. I do have something I can share per what you're saying. There are like dozens of bills every year in relating to education in general. So I can send you a list of them if you want.
That would be great. Maybe we can share that with the entire commission.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'll forward it to the chair, and then you can send it to all of you, or something like that.
Dr. Heenan, did you want to comment at all on? No. Okay. All right. Very good. Commissioner Notch.
Just wanted to put a plug in. Prior to the switch in our approach for the Legend Policy Committee, I was trying to track an enormous amount of bills, and it felt like a relay race and batons handing off, and it was very, very hard to keep up with it. A tool that was really helpful for me is the Legiscan site. You can do keyword searches, you can look at specific bills, and then as it's moving through the cycle, you can set preferences to get regular updates via email. So it was like having an assistant handle all of the tracking for me. So just putting a plug in for that tool as well, but definitely point noted on making sure that we have resources in preparation, in particular for our April visit.
Okay, thank you so much. So now the public comment slide again, please. Do we have a comment in the room? Please.
Can you hear me? There you go. Oh, I have to lean in. I can pretend that I am 6 feet tall, and then my wife is going to finally be happy that she has a tall husband. My name is Nair Castillo McIntyre. I am a co-founding member of an organization called the Albany Disability Squad out in Albany, north of Berkeley, if you're not familiar. Our organization was founded in the early stages of shelter in place due to the budget cuts that affected mostly students with disabilities in our district. And I'm not sure if this is the right place to make a comment about this, but since you were talking about legislation, as most of you know, I assume, last October, Governor Newsom signed into legislation a SB 447, which is inclusive education for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities at the college level. And one of our Albany Disability Squad members was part of the team that pushed that legislation forward. And since it authorizes California State University and request the University of California to establish and maintain inclusive college programs for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities. It seems to be an opening. I was reminded of it yesterday with, I believe maybe it was Commissioner Hamilton, who asked the question, what happens with our students once they graduate from K through 12? So now, at least in California, what may happen is that our students get to go to college and have an opportunity to meet their potential. Because this might give a pool for K through 12 public institutions to create and track goals that are that give our students an opportunity to meet appropriately challenging objectives. There's this other organization called Think College that has created some guidelines to write goals that encourage and facilitate college readiness. And they group them in 4 categories. I won't go into the details because of the length, but they are education, career and employment, community engagement and services, and independence. And so my question for the Commission is, will you consider a discussion of SB 447 and its ramifications for K through 12 education and beyond as an agenda item for future discussion, and focusing on how this may transform or even radicalize special education across the state? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and this is very timely. Being at the university level, I'm a big supporter of that initiative, and I'm very familiar with Think College and a number of the universities in California that have such programs. And so thank you so much for sharing that. Do any of the commissioners have any comments related to that? But
I just want to second that emotion. I think that would be wonderful, and thank you for coming today and bringing that to our attention.
All right, very good. Well, that brings to a close. Well, let's see if we have any public comment.
There are no callers.
Thank you so much. So that brings to a close our morning agenda. So I think we're ready for a nice long lunch break, and we'll reconvene at 1 o'clock. Thanks to everyone for participating. For our February Advisory Commission on Special Education meeting, and I hope everyone had a nice break and lunch. And our first agenda item is general public comment. So if we could put the public comment slide up on the screen, please. So this is the opportunity for the public to comment on any matter, including items not on the agenda. So let's give the public some time. If they'd like to make any statements or questions. We'll wait 1 more minute and then move on.
There are no callers.
Thank you so much. All right, we're going to move on then to the CDE annual performance report. and that will be presented by Shiloh Duncan Berserell and Cindy Kazanis. Shiloh, thank you. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Oh. It goes up because some of us are short. So thank you so much, commissioners, for having me back again. This is sort of a two-parter. I'm going to start off with some of the updates from our previous report in October, when we didn't have all the data, some additional data and information for you all, and then I'm going to be joined by my colleague, Cindy Kazanis, who is over the Analysis, Measurement, and Accountability Division, Reporting and Accountability Division, who oversees the dashboard. Just going to give you an update on the dashboard and what's that looking like this year, and sort of what you can see now that it's live. So thank you so much. And you also are all very brave to have an extensive data presentation right after lunch on day 2. So give yourself some caffeine and we'll get on to it. So one of the things that I wanted to cover was a small update on the compliance indicators. I didn't talk too much about disproportionality, but there was a number of questions about disproportionality last time I was here. And so I wanted to break down some of the data so you all could see it. Now, one of the things we often talk about with disproportionality is significant disproportionality, and that there's a difference between the two. The IDEA and the regulations specific to the IDEA call out disproportionality as a priority area for monitoring, and they also call out significant disproportionality as another priority area. And so in 2017, the U.S. Department of Education published pretty extensive guidance on how states were to calculate disproportionality and significant disproportionality. And we have been applying that process since 2017. The way we work in disproportionality and significant disproportionality is the first 2 years of disproportionality we kind of use as an early warning system. And the reason for that is because once districts become significantly disproportionate, meaning they're 3 years disproportionate in the same area, there is a fiscal consequence. We have to set aside 15% of their federal funds, and they can only use that to address this issue. And so because of that, we want to give districts the opportunity to address the causes of disproportionality before it becomes significant. So it's a graduated process. Now, it should sort of be clear that this is an extensive set of calculations that we do for each LEA. So each LEA has 98 different calculations that are performed annually around disproportionality. And they center around 3 main areas: a least restrictive environment, identification, and placement. And then it's also looked at different disability categories and by race and ethnicity. And so for disproportionate representation, that's identification, what we typically find is that students who are African American and who are white are often overrepresented in special education. The way this calculation is done is that we look at the composition of all the students in the district, and we determine are students of a specific race or ethnic category overrepresented based on the composition of that district. So as you can see here, in 2021, we did have a large number of districts who were identified for Indicator 9 for Hispanic over-identification, but we are now seeing that we are seeing more students who are over-identified who are white, Native American, and African American. The other, and these are the 7 race ethnicity categories that are identified by the U.S. Department of Education. We do not have any over-identification districts who are over-identified who in the area of Pacific Islander, multi-ethnic, or Asian. Indicator 10 looks at disproportionate representation by disability. So as you can see, these are the number of districts who are identified in those areas, and overwhelmingly we have the highest number of districts who are identified for students who are Hispanic, who have a specific learning disability. And you can see the other categories as well. We also have a high number of students, districts who are identified who are African American with and other health impairment, and that includes things like attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder and other types of health impairments. And also students who are African American and identified as being emotionally disturbed. Discipline is another category for disproportionality. And so when we find districts in this category, you will see that we find districts who are disproportionately suspending or expelling students who are African American and Hispanic. And that is pretty consistent year over year. So you'll see that for all the 4 categories for African American students, there is an discipline that's happening. And then if you look at the different types of categories, that includes least restrictive environment, you'll see that the majority of districts are identified for disproportionality in identification. And then another high number who are identified for disproportionality in discipline. And so when we identify those areas, we often are working with districts to address the root causes analysis and identify high leverage strategies that are associated with those areas specifically. When districts are identified as being disproportionate, it is considered the highest level that they are working on. Significant disproportionality is, again, those districts who are identified as having been disproportionate for 3 or more years in the same area. So it's not that one year they were disproportionate in discipline and another year they were disproportionate in placement. This is that they are in the same area for the same student group for 3 consecutive years. And so 128 of those LEAs are selected for significant disproportionality based on identification, 7 of them for placement, and 3 of them are for overall identification. We do not have this year any students who were, or any LEAs who were identified for significant disproportionality based on suspension expulsion. I do anticipate that that will change in the coming years, but as you remember, discipline is a lag year set of data, and we did have instances last year and the year before that were based on COVID restrictions where the data was not really indicative of what we would normally see. Okay, so I'm going to briefly point out pieces of this, but this is something that you all had asked for the last time I was here. I could not show you all the outcomes for our assessment indicators, so I wanted to provide you the updated information here today so that you all could see it. And I compared this year to last year. I'm just going to point out a couple of things on these slides. Happy to answer questions later about them specifically. But one of the things I would like to point out is while we are not meeting all of our requirements in terms of participation, we are seeing more and more. And that's really, when you look through these slides, what I would like to highlight is that while we may not be hitting the target in some of our areas, we are seeing more students participate and more students becoming proficient from last year. And I think that's really a positive turn of events that we want to continue to push our districts and LEAs to achieve. And so one of the things you will see is that when we look at grade 4, we are typically seeing our participation rates are being met, but when we hit grades 8 and 11, we are not seeing our participation rates being met, and that is a 95%. So remember when I said there were 98 different calculations for disproportionality? There's well over 100 individual calculations that are now for our indicator 3. There used to be just 2 calculations, proficiency and not proficient. Now there's many, many more. And so sorry if these are a little bit overwhelming. It's one of the challenges of presenting this data. But what I want to point out to you all, and I think what's really important, is when you look at the 2022 data for proficiency for students with IEPs who are taking grade level, the grade level achievement test, which is our CASP test, that in reading, we are meeting our target. And we are getting better for the most part over the previous year. And I think that's really encouraging for us that we're meeting our targets. We are not meeting our math targets, and that I know is a frustrating space. I also have a child who's struggling sometimes with math. I feel like we have to learn fractions for 12 years. And so, but I think it's important to note that for the math data, we are seeing an increase. So if you see in the grade 8 result and the grade 11 result, you'll see there was an increase in proficiency from last year, even though we were not making the target. I'm also well encouraged on the proficiency rates for both 4th grade math and ELA and 11th grade ELA, because those rates are relatively high. If you remember previous years when we used to have different tests prior to 2020, you know that sometimes our proficiency rates in those areas were hovering around 10%. And to see that we have almost a 20% proficiency rate for grade 4, I think is encouraging for us now. It's sad to see it drop off in grade 8, but I do think that's some of the work that we've been doing over the last 5 or 6 years to increase reading proficiency and math proficiency at the younger grades. And then this indicator 3C is proficiency rate for the alternate assessment, students who take the alternate assessment. We are meeting a number of these targets. We're not meeting all of them, but we are meeting a number of them, and the proficiency rates are they're a little bit all over the place. Some of them are better, some of them are worse, but we are meeting a number of the targets. So this is an area we're going to look much more closely at over the coming year. And then finally, indicator 3D is the gap in proficiency rates for children with IEPs versus all students. It's the gap rate. We are meeting the targets for all of these indicators, which I think is encouraging. And so I think we would like to highlight that. What we would love to see going forward is that this gap percentage decreases. So that's, I think, something that we would love to continue to highlight year after year, is just a less of a gap between our students with disabilities and without. So the other indicators that I would like to identify are some of our preschool indicators. I know that you all had specific questions about preschool. Last time we were here, you'll have seen this data before. It's nothing new, but I thought it might be helpful to break it down by race and ethnicity and by disability category. And so when you start to look at our disability categories for students in a regular preschool program, you'll notice that the majority of our students in a regular preschool program, the majority of them have autism and a speech and language impairment. And you will see, as we sort of begin to break down the race and ethnicity disabilities, you'll see that's actually pretty standard. So we're not seeing a lot of over-identification. We see it across the board is the same. So you're not seeing a lot of changes there, which I think is helpful for us to think when we're thinking about disproportionality. For students who are in separate classes, we're also seeing that percentage, but what I would like to highlight is that other health impairment that we still tend to see a higher number of students who are ages 3 to 5 with other health impairment who are being served in a separate class. And so kind of beginning to ask the questions as we move forward as to why we continue to see those students served in a separate class as opposed to a regular preschool program. And so keeping in mind, this does not include our students who are in TK age 5. If they're age 4 in TK, it does include them, but it doesn't include that students who are age 5. But I think this is something we are continuing to review in terms of why we would have such a high number of students who have another health impairment in a separate preschool program. And then again, students who are home, we are also seeing a high number of students who are of preschool students who are being served at home who have another health impairment. And so we want to continue to review that, and also a hearing impairment. I think having more opportunities for students who have a hearing impairment to matriculate into normal preschool programs is going to be important. The thing that I want to highlight here that I think is important for you all to understand is that this does not mean that they do not attend a regular preschool program. It just means this is where they're receiving their services. So part of the work that we're going to be doing over the next several years with our preschool technical assistance center is working with districts about how they make decisions about which students go into regular preschool programs, why can we not provide services in regular preschool programs, this sort of push-in model that doesn't always exist within the preschool setting, and how can we encourage it to exist. So that's some of the conversations that we will be having over time. So this is another challenging indicator that I wanted to update you all. We did not have data in our annual performance report from last year in this set of data, but I wanted to kind of walk you through that. This is our preschool assessment. We use the DRDP, Desired Results Developmental Profile, to conduct our preschool assessment. It is a pre-assessment and a post-assessment. It looks at 2 points in time for a child to see if they have improved over time. We did not meet the target last year for most of these indicators, but we are starting to meet the target this year, which I think is a really good indicator. And what's also, to me, I think exciting is that, and you'll see this, I think, upcoming, is that now our targets are starting to shift up. And so if we can continue the process of improving year after year, then we're going to see, I think, some changes for our students' outcomes. And this is a very good example. So from last year to this year, the target increased from 77 to 78, while we did not meet it for students who entered preschool below the expectation for social emotional skills. We did see the ability to meet that indicator for students who are functioning within age expectations. So continuing to see that move. What we did not see is for the summary statement 1, students who, we did not see the improvement. So that is something we're going to continue to work on. 7B is the acquisition and use of skills. Again, very similar to what we're seeing. Students who are coming into preschool program below expectations are not meeting the target. Students who come in at age expectations are functioning within the outcome or are meeting the target. And so part of the work we are going to continue to work on with our Technical Assistance Center, providing technical assistance to the field, is identifying those LEAs where we see a struggle in this space and supporting them in that process. And then use of appropriate behaviors, very similar story. We are meeting in one area students who are entering the preschool program within age expectations continue to leave the program and improve, whereas students who entered below age expectations are not. And so very similar stories, 2 very divergent paths. And that's one of the reasons why the data is split up in this way. For indicator 3, we don't split up the data in that way. It's not a pre-test, post-test kind of evaluation. And so it's important, I think, at this age to be able to see that occur so we can begin to look at, for LEAs who are not meeting this target, what is the work that they're doing to make improvements. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Cindy Kazanis, to talk a little bit about the dashboard, because I think I have overloaded you all with numbers and charts and data. So I'll give you all, your brains and eyes, just a quick break, because her slides are a little bit easier to see.
Thank you, Shiloh. Good afternoon. Again, Cindy Kazanis, the Director for the Analysis, Measurement, and Accountability Reporting Division. We are responsible for data out for the department, not only for DataQuest, but also for the California School Dashboard. And I'm preparing for this presentation, I realized it's been a while since I've presented to you, so I hope that these slides are helpful to understand the larger context of all of our student outcomes, but please do, I'll save time for questions if you have any questions, and they can be something as basic as why do you have a color system for performance? So again, thank you for inviting me today. The California School Dashboard is California's way of making sure we're in compliance with state and federal laws for accountability for all students. And I realize for special education, you have increased measures, and Shiloh knows those forward and backward, but the dashboard meets the requirements of the Every Student Succeeds Act, and then the requirements of the local control funding formula. And we also have a purpose statement that we like to show, and it is on the screen today, but just essentially that we're, the dashboard is intended to provide parents, it's intended to provide guardians and community members with actionable data so they can participate in decisions around what schools do and how they support students and what districts do through the planning processes, so that ultimately that all students have the opportunity to learn and to succeed, not only in if they go to college, but career and beyond. Okay, so we do use a performance color system, and you can see two different images on this screen. The first image is of 4 cell phone bars, and that signifies what we call status only, so it's 1 year of data. And on the right-hand side of the screen, we have an image of a dial pointed to the green color, but we have the colors of, I guess, a rainbow, beginning with red and ending with blue. And that signifies that we have colors. And what we mean by colors is that we need 2 years of data to create a performance level. And a performance level that we're looking for everyone is green. So that is the goal. But you will see today that the state has a long way to go, and so do our students with disabilities. The cell phone bar this year is only used for one indicator, the college career indicator, because we were prohibited in 2022 from using 2 years of data. There was an interest from the legislature to make the ease back into accountability after the pause during COVID, something that was more tangible. And so the college career indicator looks back at a senior's performance. It looks back at their assessment performance. And because these students who were seniors in 2023 were juniors in 2021 and in 2022, thank you. And there was flexibility with our assessments. We only have the 1 year of data. We're not able to capture the 2 years of data points to create a color. So all that to say, the image of the cell phone bars will disappear in 2024. We'll have a full return of the dashboard this time next year. Colors also signify, again, how much schools have grown from the prior years, so 2021, 2022. And we are, I mentioned that there's this color scheme with red being the lowest. So we think about if you're driving a car and you're on empty, the far end being the lowest, and then the high end of highest performance of being full. In looking at the data, just a couple things in case, again, you're not looking at the dashboard on a daily basis like we have to. Charter schools are treated as their own local educational agency. That is specifically under the LCFF law. And so you will see whether or not a charter school is a dependent charter school, if they are authorized by a district and act as a school of the district, they still are treated separately. They're treated actually as their own local educational agency. So we don't roll up any data to a district. And this is significant for districts just like Los Angeles Unified or others that may have charter schools that you're used to seeing their data together. We also have at the LEA level students with disabilities, of course, that are receiving special education services at another district or maybe the county office of education. They're sent back. That information is sent back to their district of residence. And I'm going to go into this in the next slide. This is the District of Special Education Accountability. And what is unique for this and this rule is that we only used to apply this to the academic indicators, to the mathematics and English language arts assessments. Since we released the dashboard in 2022, we were able to bring those into all of the indicators. So you actually see we believe, increased accountability at those districts because those students are still their students, even though they're receiving services perhaps in another district or, again, the County Office of Education. What you see on the screen and the link within the slide presentation is a flyer that we've put together to talk about this rule and the importance of this rule and how this existed on prior dashboards versus the current dashboards. And so this is a great resource if you have not been interacted with this, or if you want to talk to a fellow educator about it, to use to describe how this works within our accountability system. So overall, in 2023, the state of California, this is for all students, and when we think about student groups, they are slightly different than what you're working with in special education. We have 13 different student groups. So we're looking not only at program student groups, but our race ethnicity. So overall, for our all students, we see in many of our indicators either a yellow or an orange, specifically chronic English learner progress. We see a yellow, and in the remaining indicators, an orange. And as we've already talked about, that college career indicator looks different because it's just the 1 year of data, and we're at a medium for the 2023 school year. I have pulled together some slides and some data sets that I thought would be of interest to you, in which we're going to be looking at students with disabilities for each of the indicators next to all students. So specifically, I wanted to first introduce you to an additional report that we make available off of the California School Dashboard. And this is called the Student Group Report. It's available for any school, it's available for any district, and then for the state of California. So this is actually a report that will show the 13 different student groups. I truncated it just at the program student groups, which is why you don't see any of the race ethnicity. But we do see all students, English learners, foster youth, homeless, systemically disadvantaged, and students with disabilities. So we can see at a glance through the colors that are listed on this chart, each of those student groups' performance by indicator. And the color is not only in color, but it also is written there for ease of following along. So in the far column is our students with disabilities. Just to introduce, our English learner progress indicator is only relevant, it only has one student group, English learners. Those English learners may be students with disabilities, but we only look at the one student group. We also see for students with disabilities, they received a yellow overall for chronic absenteeism, and then suspension, graduation rate in mathematics, and orange and English language arts, a red, and a low in college career. So we'll dig into this a little bit more. What we are going to start with is our chronic absenteeism indicator. For purposes of accountability, we look at grades K through 8. For reporting, we actually report on all of our grades. So K through 12, you will see this information on DataQuest. In 2023, we did see a decrease. So we saw a decline not only for all students for over 5% for the K-8 span, but for students with disabilities, we saw a decline. But you can still see, even though that student group was a yellow, they were at a higher rate than all students at 33%. So, almost 10%, 9% higher than all students, but you can also see they made a decline. We saw that in every single one of our student groups for the chronic absenteeism indicator. The other thing I wanted to introduce you to is this, we call this a baseball card. And this baseball card is available once you go on the main site, you've typed in a school name, you've typed in a district name, and you start to dig into the data. You actually select, it says view more data. This shows you the number of students that are in that student group statewide. So K through 8 students in the chronic absenteeism indicator is for students with disabilities is close to 600,000 students. And then our total number of students K through 8 statewide, 3.9, almost 4 million students. So just I wanted to make you aware of the significance of those numbers. You can see this at the school level. You can see this at a district level. And so just something to pay attention to. The suspension rate indicator covers all of our grades. It's the one indicator that has the complete grade span in its indicator. And we're looking at students who have been suspended for at least one full day. So we know sometimes a student, especially in the upper grades, may get suspended for a period. If those periods equal up to a day, we will include them in this indicator. Overall, the state is at an orange with 3.5% suspended at least one day, and that's a slight increase of 0.4%. For students with disabilities, we do see a slightly higher suspension rate at almost 6% at 5.9, which was an increase of 0.5%. So both, increasing, although not significantly, but significantly enough that we're still in the orange. So that is definitely work for all of our student groups to look at. For our English Learner Progress Indicator, as I mentioned, this is the indicator where we're looking at students who have made progress in learning the English language, and that is unique to that one student group of English learners. So as a state, we are at 48.7% making progress. I think what's really important to share with you is this is the first year we've been able to include the ALT LPAC assessments in this indicator, so we're really happy to see this indicator finally be inclusive of all students that are English learners. For our college career indicator, we're only looking at the grade 12, and again, between our all students versus our students with disabilities, you do see a full level that's been dropped, but you see a significant gap between the percent prepared. So for the state at 43.9% for all students, and then for students with disabilities at 12.3%. So very significant gap between those two numbers. This is measuring percent of students who are prepared for college or career by their school or district. Many students show that they're prepared because they've scored high enough on our assessments. So that's something that we continue to be concerned about, that it is based, a lot of students are showing preparedness on an assessment versus other measures. And so we are definitely have been looking at this indicator and trying to make sure that we're measuring the right things to show that our students are making progress in this area. For our academic indicators, of course, there's two, English language arts, and then we'll show you mathematics. That is only measuring our grades 3 through 8 and 11, which is the requirement under federal law. And we are looking to see how far students are from the standard. And so that's why you see the language here about below standard. So as a state overall, we're 13.6% to 13.6 points below standard, which we've lessened, we've gone in and are labeled as maintaining, whereas our students with disabilities are at 96.3 points below standard. And also in that maintenance category, but students with disabilities have moved into a red category, whereas the state is at the orange. This indicator, as well as the mathematics indicator, brings into account the alternative assessment as well. So in mathematics, students with disabilities and all students are at the same performance level, but you do see that large difference in the spread for the below standard. So all students being at 49.1%, and students with disabilities at 127.3%, 3 points rather, below standard. For students with disabilities, this is an increase, so this is a positive thing at 5.5 points. And then to round out the graduation rate indicator, which we all look at, this is a measurement of students who are graduating within 4 or 5 years. The state as a whole declined by 1 percentage point to 86.4%, and students with disabilities declined by 2.5% to be at 72.7%. In future years, we will be bringing on the alt diploma, so that's work that we've been doing with Shiloh and the special education team, and I think that will be, that'll be a nice reflection for students with disabilities, but that is for future dashboards. So in terms of what does all this mean? For accountability, what we need to do is we also have requirements to look at if you're not meeting the needs for student groups, you will be considered eligible for differentiated assistance under state law. For federal law, we look at schools. So that's the difference between districts and schools. So we're going to start with the districts first. And for 2023, we look at not only districts, but county offices of education and charter schools. Charter schools were only identified in 2019. They've not been brought back into the fold. They have some different criteria that we look at. But overall, we are back on track for differentiated assistance and these determinations. Something that's a little different that's starting in 2023 per a change in state law is that the eligibility is not just for 1 year for support, it's now 2 years for support. So what has been consistent since the dashboard was first released in 2017 is that the students with disability student group has been in the greatest need of support. That has they continue to be in that top spot with the largest number of districts showing that this is a student group in most need, followed by homeless students and English learners. And for homeless students, when we look at it at the LEA level, we actually have to drop our N size in half. So we drop it down to 15, which is required by state law. For charter schools, it is also consistent that students with disabilities is the student group in the greatest need, followed by socioeconomically disadvantaged and English learners. So switching over, we've also, I mentioned the ESSA requirements, and for ESSA, we don't disaggregate by specific student groups as much as I've just done for LCFF, but students with disabilities continues to be the focus of attention for, again, for support for districts and support for schools. So you should be seeing those, the student groups being paid more attention to in the local control and accountability plans that are being written right now by districts, and so that is the conversation that is happening in the field. I'm going to take a pause and switch over to a new report that we've been developing with Shiloh's team and the Special Education Division, our special education by program setting reports. And again, for those of you that may have been following this legislation, Senate Bill 692, which was signed into law in 2022, established a requirement that the department needs to publish data related to federal measures of least restrictive environment for pupils with disabilities on our website. We also needed to include it as a resource on the dashboard. So it is off of the dashboard under our resources tab. The data needed to be disaggregated by race or ethnicity and by local educational agency. So I'm pleased to report that we have finally met the requirement and released these data this past January. Just as far as how the report works and what data we're looking at, we are grabbing students who are enrolled as of Census Day, which is the first Wednesday in October. And that data is submitted to us through our student level data system, which is the California Longitudinal Pupil Achievement Data System by districts and by schools. So that is a required collection that we open up in October and we close annually in January. The report also disaggregates information not only by least restrictive environment, but race, ethnicity, and by LEA. We've also included, beyond the statutory requirements, enrollment information for all students with disabilities aged 3 to 22 who have IEPs and are enrolled on Census Day. We have 7 different disaggregations or reporting categories: race, ethnicity, disability category, age range, grade span, gender, English learner status, and academic year. So there's a wealth of information in these reports. We also can see this information not only at the state, the county, the reporting district, but the District of Special Ed Accountability and our school of attendance levels. So I have provided access to those reports. If you wanted to even just Google special education enrollment by program setting for CDE, it'll come you'll be able to see that information as well. But we hope that this is going to be a good resource for the field, especially those that are in the classroom, those that are at districts and counties supporting our students with disabilities. So with that, Shiloh's going to take all the hard questions, but I know we've covered a lot, so please, anything goes, and happy to help move the conversation along.
Is anybody asleep yet?
Thank you so much for the presentation, the thoroughness of the data and so forth, and very comprehensive, and especially from the last legislation in terms of reporting by LRE and so forth. So I want to see if any of our commissioners, or maybe they're overwhelmed with all the data. But I see Commissioner Snipes has a question or comment.
You know I'm coming at you with the preschool stuff, right? Actually, I just, while you were presenting specifically around OHI and preschool indicators, in my experience and kind of in working in this world for a while, I feel I would love to dive deeper into that, because I feel like it becomes a catch-all for those kids who don't quite fit in other categories, and also can really be applied to children who are identified as having behavior issues. And I would imagine that would also relate to the reason why they tend to be served in more segregated settings, just based on the requests for support around behavior in early childhood. I think that all of that is related, and so just kind of taking a deeper dive into OHI and how it's determined and where those kids go in preschool, I'm really interested in that information. And then just speech language, just cultural and linguistically appropriate assessment processes, but also the shortage of speech language pathologists, right? Lots of preschool kids are getting their services in separate settings if they have speech language impairment, because most of the time, not most of the time, because many of them are receiving it virtually with a paraprofessional supporting. And so just also other ways that we can try to close that gap in SLP shortages. Yeah.
We don't speak too often on sort of issues of labor. I know that there's a lot of work that's happening at the legislative level and at the state level. What I think it might be helpful, because I think this is now the few times that I've come up, more than once time that I've come up here, and there's been lots of questions about preschool, is perhaps having a presentation by our Early Childhood Technical Assistance Center, ACSE. They are a great group of folks talking about how they're addressing some of the work that's happening in this space in terms of addressing not necessarily the identification piece, but also the issue around how we're ensuring the inclusion parts, how we're ensuring that transition from C to B, because a lot of the questions that might come up might also be addressed in that space as well, as terms of what is the catch-all, because we have different identification categories that exist in Part B than exist in Part C.
Well, I guess I'll just chime in here. It's sort of like, so what, now what? And looking at the data. And obviously we have a new state director, so, trying to make sense of, and I'm not going to put her on the spot at all, but, it's overwhelming. There are some data points that are just, they grab you, in terms of so far out there, with African American students and with our Latino students when it comes to SLD. And so now what? So what, now what, kind of thing. And then how do we, compare nationally with other states? And yes, I'd love to hear, I think, as we talk about agenda building, from the technical assistance centers, because I'm sure you guys are already starting to talk about how to move forward to address some of this. And you've got the feds coming. So, I
can address a couple of those things. So the data that you saw here today is the data we are using to identify LEAs for monitoring, for the levels of monitoring. And I came here in June and talked about our monitoring system. And it is an integrated system that looks at this data. And the breakdown that you're seeing is the breakdown we want every district to do. break it down by race, ethnicity, break it down by disability, break it down by gender, break it down by school site, break it down by all of these different factors by placement. And so that the work that you're seeing here is also a product of what we're asking LEAs to do in determining what the issues and problems are, and then diving down into the root cause. I think you're correct in there's a lot, and there's a lot of work to do. One of the struggles that we found for LEAs approaching this work is that they are every problem with a single solution, right? So every problem has its own solution. So one of the things we're really working with LEAs on is identifying a high leverage strategy. So instead of working on 10 things at 10%, we're working on 1 or 2 things, and we're putting all of our resources into that. The analogy I use is sort of when you have a lot of high interest credit cards. You start with the highest interest credit card, you pay off that one, and then it sort of begins to snowball. And that's where we're trying to get LEAs to focus, is like, let's get the thing that's gonna have the biggest impact. Let's get that started, let's get that working well before we focus on another shiny or important thing. And so identifying a high leverage strategy, meaning a strategy that's going to impact multiple students groups, that's gonna impact multiple areas, is going to be important. So that data piece is a key part of the work. The other thing I will answer is how do we compare to other states? That's one of my least favorite questions because we're just not like other states. So other states can make bigger movements because they are much smaller. So even our contemporaries like New York has 1 very large district. We have 5 very large districts. Florida has a similar size in some place population as, but they only have 51 school districts. We have well over 2,000 local education agencies. So when we talk about how do we compare to other states, it is a difficult conversation because we do tend to lag behind other states, but I think the work that we're doing is really good. It's just harder to see the needle year after year. The changes are more incremental for us than other states.
Yes, the other area, too, that I would look at, we had Marquita Grano-Shire here this morning, who is the chair of the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, and we also heard from CARS Plus yesterday in terms of the number of not fully credentialed teachers and how any of that might correlate, not cause and effect, obviously, but a relationship with not as fully prepared teaching force, across the board in California related to some of these. I would just be interesting to kind of analyze the data.
Yeah, and I think it's a key factor. The things that we talked about, the high leverage strategies, I think is also a factor when we're talking about teacher retention. When we have students or teachers who are coming in, it's like, oh, on Monday you have your PBIS day, and on Wednesday you're gonna have your restorative justice, and on Friday don't forget to do your MTSS or your UDL or PD and that kind of thing, and it just becomes very overwhelming. So if we can get districts much more focused on an individual high leverage strategy, turning the volume up on some things, turning the volume down on some things, will, I think, help in some spaces, particularly around teacher retention.
Commissioner Hamilton?
This report clearly shows students with disabilities are at the greatest need for support. And, I'm pretty disappointed to see that, I've been sitting up here at this table for 4 years now and not seeing that improvement is pretty disheartening to me. And I also can't help but think about the fact that students with disabilities continue to be left out of the LCFF and continue to be left out of the big focus and financial commitment to community schools. And it just feels like students with disabilities continue to be left out of the equations that are funding, giving funds to the group that needs them the most. So I don't really have a question so much as just processing this aloud and speaking to my fellow commissioners and asking the tough questions about where we need to continue to push to try to make change and see how we can better support our students with disabilities, because I feel like we're failing them.
Commissioner Arakawa.
Thank you, Commissioner Hamilton. I agree with what you just said. I did want to thank you for the work that you're doing. We had visitors yesterday talking to us about the Native American Indian student experience, and it really is helpful to be able to see some of these stark numbers, and when you look at the disproportionate representation of various ethnic and groups, in addition to within the subset of ethnic groups within the group of students with disabilities, is pretty striking. And so I think I'm grateful for you for bringing this out and making it available to everybody to see online, because I think that will give us something to work with so that we can all focus on where there is so much need. And I did have another question. When I didn't realize that the charter schools were separate from the districts, and I know Commissioner Hamilton has a child in a charter school. Mine actually is also in a charter school, and I wondered, like, how do we hold? I don't know if they get reported back to the homeschool as well, or if it's just completely separate, because I wonder how accountability works when, I guess, we consider our charter schools as part of our district, even though technically we know they're charter schools. Kind of how that information gets shared with the district and the families in the districts about how they work. If there's reaggregation of data sometimes to make that happen.
So I think Cindy can talk a little bit about how that works for the dashboard, but and we at the division mirrored that process. So it doesn't really go back we don't ever send it back.
No, you can see information, the information together on DataQuest. So DataQuest is really probably a better reporting tool if you want to see the inclusion of charters. The default is when you get to that report on DataQuest, whether it's enrollment or you name it, graduation rate outcomes, is going to be leaving the charters out, but you can actually add them back in to look at that performance. The other thing that's important, especially at the secondary school level, is that alternative school filter. And so again, on DataQuest, we've added that filter to a lot of our reports. We call that the dashboard alternative school status. And because so many students with disabilities are served in those schools, I think that's another way to also look and slice the data.
So then the alternative schools are also not part of the district's information on the dashboard. Is that what you're saying?
No, I didn't mean to get that confused. There are charter schools who are also alternative schools, but for the majority of our alternative schools, over 1,000 alternative schools, they are included in their they're part of a district, and they're part of a county office of education. They live in that space. They get aggregated to that space. But just in terms of this sending back of students, you do see it in the data in 2022. You actually see a decline in the number of county offices identified for differentiated assistance, because we've sent that data back to their the students' data back to their district of special ed accountability. And so we've had to have some tough conversations with some districts that weren't paying attention to that change in the rule. And well, these students aren't our students, and they absolutely are. And you are being held accountable. And so that's where we see the data.
Yeah, and for special education monitoring, we mirrored that same process. So we. When I say there's 2,200 LEAs that we monitor, there's 1,500 of them that have fewer than 100 students with disabilities, and most of them are charter schools. So we monitor them individually.
First off, thank you for the presentation and the update on it. And one of my comments is, I like seeing this data. I think it's very important to see all this data, but at the same time, it's kind of overwhelming, to be honest. I mean, it's a lot of data. However, my thing is, like, when we have the first data on disproportional versus significant disproportion, or what is the discipline disproportion, all these type of things. But my question is, do you guys look into what's causing this issue, what's causing it? For what's the main issue, why students are being suspended, why are certain races are having this. I think for me, if I was to look really into this data, I would really look deep into it. I'm just curious, do you guys actually do that in a way?
So what we do is we identify districts based on this data, and we have them, because this is a complicated problem, disproportionality specifically, but a lot of the issues we're talking about are very complicated problems. I often say if it was a problem that we could have solved it easily, we would have done it by now. It is a very complicated and sometimes individual issue. So a lot of districts, for some districts, it is bias that exists in the staff and in the individuals working with the students, and it's not a bias that is very evident. It's just something that happens as they're working with students, and so it requires training, anti-bias, anti-racism support and training. For some of the districts, it might be different. It might have to do with there are significant issues that happen in the community that need to be supported and addressed, so that when students come to school, they are focused on education. So I think the issues are very individualized by the LEA, and so what we ask LEAs to do is we ask them to dig deep into the data and identify the root cause for themselves, and then develop a plan to address it.
Another question I have is, what was it? Well, I like, when we see all this type of data, I mean, of course, it's very important, and I'm sure the CD, I mean, there's a lot of problems, and there's a lot of solutions we can solve these problems, but I'm really curious on, like, what is, in your opinion, what is one problem that the CDE right now is trying to work on? Like, the one problem that you would say, what would it be?
So I can tell you, and I've talked about this before, is our theory of action is we believe that if we have students in the right placements with the right supports, exposed to high quality instruction, that many of these things that we see in the outcomes of the data will be addressed. We'll see fewer behavior problems. We'll see students doing better on tests. We'll see more students who are graduating, who are college and career ready. We will see a lot of things that we would like to see, and that is sort of our theory of action. So a lot of the focus that we have and the work that we do is focused on getting students in the right placements with the right supports, exposed to high quality instruction.
Okay, we have a comment from Commissioner Topalian.
Thank you very much. And again, Shiloh, great to see you, and thank you for this information. I'm just wondering, what do school districts indicate contributes to the success of the fourth grade students in ELA?
I don't know if I've surveyed them to ask them quite yet. I think a lot of it has to do with what I've always called the challenges of the master schedule when you get into middle school and high schools, is that there is just more inclusive work that's happening at the elementary school work. Not that there isn't inclusive work that's happening at the middle and high school levels, but it's more challenging because of the way the master schedule is often created for students at those levels, and you just don't see it as much. So I think that's probably where we see it. The other thing is that we as a state have put a lot of resource into early grade literacy. We had a special a professional development grant from the U.S. Department of Education that focused very strongly for 5 years on early learning and literacy. So I think that's probably, we're seeing some of the impacts from that grant in the data. So hopefully continuing to see that as we move forward in the work.
Could I just back that up and just also ask, because these are the kids who were in kindergarten during COVID when we did shut down. And I know from my experience, my child was in kindergarten at that time, and he learned how to read and go to school during COVID. And he's in fourth grade right now. So I do see the success of that. But I also wonder if the funding and all the resources, like you said, were all available for students and what we poured into it. And now that we're taking all that back and the money's not going to be there, how it's going to look as we progress, because there's some kids still going to fall behind. So I'm really concerned about that as we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I don't have a crystal ball to know what that is going to look like. I do think funding was a particularly had an impact in this space over the fourth grade and the eighth grade parts. hopefully we'll continue to see. I know that the $500 million initial investment is an ongoing investment from the state. At least it was last year, and I think it will continue to be as we continue to maintain our financial support that's required in law. So I do think that we will hopefully continue to see that. What the focus of our work is going to be over the next year or so is identifying the districts where we're seeing that slide, where they were meeting the target and now they're under the target. And so how can we support them getting back over the target? I know that Director Heenan has been very specific about how do we get the districts that are at the band, the ones who are close to the target but not quite there, how do we get them versus the districts? We spend a lot of our resources always looking at the districts at the very bottom, but is there a way for us to kind of change the conversation for the districts who are close?
Commissioner Ding.
Thank you for your presentation, Shyla. I love the stats and the hardcore numbers. I'm looking at the dashboard, and I'm really happy to see that it's so intuitive and it's available and very comprehensive to the public. A suggestion I have is I would love this to be more well known among families and parents and community members, because before today I have looked at a lot of statistics, but I have never specifically gone into the CA School Dashboard website, and I think it's a great resource for a lot of communities to start holding their districts and schools accountable. One question I had was, for each of the groups on the website, it gives you a statistic that tells you how many points above or below standard it is on the state level and on like the school level. What standard does that refer to?
It refers to proficiency on our state assessment. So if you've met the proficiency standard, that is what we're looking to the students to achieve. So it aggregates all the student information for that school, that district, that student group, and then does the calculation of distance from standard. There's a nice handout that we make available. So the other thing I would plug, and I appreciate you saying that this is a good resource. So we spend a lot of time and funding and resources, and we continue to iterate on it, is that we have a dashboard toolkit. So if you literally do CA dashboard toolkit, we're top on Google these days, and we do make it available in other languages. So there are several of our flyers that are available in other languages. And then if you really want to dig into some of the technical points about how these indicators were developed and what the measurement is, we're on YouTube as well. So we're trying to get into the social stream. But if you have conferences you want us to attend, I know we've done some tag teaming in the past. Would definitely love to get out into other places that we have not been seen before. So.
Really appreciate that. And then one last suggestion is, I think it would be very helpful to maybe see changes over time, because I know right now it's like you just click on which year it is and see the data for that year. But I think it'd be nice to see that data plotted over several years, especially, for example, my district has been experiencing declining enrollment and seeing how that impacts the figures. But thank you very much.
Okay, very good. I want to see if there are any public comments in the room. Okay, I don't see any. So now we have the slide. Thank you very much for the public comment to call in. Do we have any callers?
There are no callers.
Thank you so much. All right. So thank you so much Shiloh and Cindy, we appreciate your presentation very much. You're always very comprehensive and thorough, and thank you for responding to our questions and comments. Okay, we're moving into item 14, which is agenda building. I think we started to do that with regard to the April meeting, but it doesn't hurt to even go beyond that to June as well. So I'll open up the floor for any comments related to the agenda. Commissioner, please.
Related to one of our public comments earlier today, it made me think about inviting Beth Foraker from the Redwood Seed Scholars Program to do a presentation. We had the honor to have her at SECO, and we are, for our SECO May meeting, we're going to go visit the program in person, and I think it would be wonderful to share the work that they're doing.
Wonderful. So this is the UC Davis post-secondary program. Redwood Scholars, I believe, is what it's called. And I know Beth personally, and this has been her passion and dream for a long time. And now, thanks to our comment earlier in terms of the funding coming from the UCs and the CSUs, it's really opening up the doors. So that would be a great topic to discuss.
Actually, I'd like to, I know you like to group themes and kind of along the same lines, I'd like to get an update or more information about the alternative diploma, kind of sticking with that. It's June, it's graduation season as well, so maybe if we can include more information. I know there's a lot of confusion with a lot of parents as to how, especially because of how you need to be eligible for the alternate assessment first, like how logistically all that plays out. Would love to learn more information about, one, how it really is working, how it should work, and then what has happened now as we're starting to roll it out. Thank you.
And I think another topic too is, and we've had to postpone Kristen Wright's presentation about community schools and inclusion. And so I know that's sort of been hanging out in the wings. And so I would add that to the agenda as well. Yes. Commissioner Stipes.
I also think just based on the suggestion that was made by the tribal group, potentially looking into having someone come in and speak about trauma responsive practices as they relate to all students, but also specific to students with disabilities, because there's a lot of crossover there. So I don't have any specific agency or organization in mind, but I think just thinking about that as we move forward and look at June, that would be great.
Very good. Thank you.
Another one is Saluna, which is a Cal Hope program by Koth. It's something that the California Health Behavior Initiative just did with Autumn Boyle and Michael, I forgot his last name, but from the California Department of Health Agency. It's a new program, a new app that was just created last month for ages 13 to 25 about mental health services for free, no cost, no ads, no insurance needed, just for free on an app. And I would love for them to come in to talk about it and about this accessibility so we can probably outreach our districts in our counties, but also people who may use it. And it's also to help students with disabilities as well. So I thought that would be a great idea to bring them in and talk about Saluna, their new app. Another thing is, I think I requested this last time, but I don't think it happened, but I really want the Office of Youth Restoration to come in to report on their juvenile halls for students with disabilities. I feel like that is very critical because I'm very passionate about that, but also like, how are we doing at the state level? How many accommodations are being accepted? Are students actually getting it? Like, what is it actually doing right now? Getting an update on that. But also another update is, I really like family empowerment centers. I think that they're doing great. I also want an update on them. It's like, what are their missions for 2024? I mean, we did hear from them in like October. That was in 2023 at the end of it. But I really want to know, like, what are their missions for 2024 and what are we doing like right now? And like, what's the new report for this year? Be great.
We have a liaison to the family empowerment centers right here. So
happy to.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And I do believe Commissioner Estes was working on a presentation on the mental health subcommittee, so we'll probably, check in with her in terms of the timing for her group to make a presentation as well. Yes. Commissioner Notch?
Sorry to add one more, but thinking about our priority areas and literacy, a lot of LEAs are starting to have conversations about SB 114, the screening for reading difficulties, including dyslexia. And I'm thinking about your now what comments earlier. And we will have these tools, but we have to have the systems and support to address the needs that are identified by the screener. So it might be nice to have California Dyslexia Initiative or some other group come in and talk about readiness preparing beyond just being able to check the compliance box that we're utilizing the screeners.
Very good. Yes, Commissioner Ruiz.
I would like to invite the PTIs, the Parent Training and Information Centers. We have some very powerful ones here in California, although they're national. There's a lot of differences between them and the family empowerment centers, but since we have them, I think it'd be great to have the PTIs come.
We're getting a full agenda. Very good. Anything else? Yes.
Another final thing is the Ravenwoods Wellness Partnership, which is in which they work with San Mateo County Department of Health, Sanford Hospital, and all these type of wellness places where they're very dedicated to supporting with low income but students with disabilities in East Palo Alto. And I believe they are working on getting a grant for it, and they talked about this at the conference, and I wanted them to come over to talk about like a report on how East Palo Alto is doing and what do they need from the state, and it would be a great opportunity. And I believe I have their contact information and their business card, so I'll do that.
Thank you very much. All right, well, we're going to move into, unless I hear from anybody else, we're going to move into general public comments. So if we could have the slide, please. And this, again, is where the public is invited to comment on any matter, including items not on the agenda.
There are no public comments.
Are there any public comments from the persons in the room? All right, seeing none, I think we've reached the end of our agenda for today. So thank you all very much, and the meeting is adjourned.